got some presentations to do and places to go, people to see afterwards. So I have a quorum. We've got a couple of councillors that are just a little bit late, but we're going to start. We're going to start here anyway. So I need first item. I need approval of minutes for September 20, please.
I'll move approval of the minutes for the 20th.
Thank you, Donna. And second it. Thank you, Sean. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed. We're going to go. Greg, you're going to be first off with utility, right? Sure. We're going to take a look at the 2019 utility operating budget, please. Sure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So at the September 20th meeting of the Finance Committee, the 2019 operating budget was presented in detail with a recommendation to reflect on the budget and make any and all inquiries and recommendations, and to receive and file the report. So to provide a bit of a brief recap on some of the highlights of the 2019 utility operating budget. The budget reflects the completion of the largest municipal infrastructure project in the history of the province, the Safe Clean Drinking Water Project. The 2019 will also represents the first full year of the new Loch Lomond drinking water treatment facility being into service, as well as a couple of new wastewater treatment facilities and some new lift stations that have been constructed. This is the last utility budget that will be brought forward under the existing rate structure, and the rate being recommended for 2019 is $1,428, an increase of 4.39%, or $60 per year. And as you'll recall, covered off that the increase was less than had been planned over the past 5 years, where it had been planned to have an increase of $72 to a total of $1,440. And we're able to keep the rates lower as a result of numerous expenditure reductions and the addition of new revenue to our operating budget, as well as the early borrowing of the $45 million. We're able to get favorable interest rates. So, we're continuing to focus on expenditure reductions and paying down debt, and focused on bringing forward strategic capital budgets as we move forward to lower our operating costs, and also strive to leverage federal and provincial funding dollars with every capital dollar invested. So with that, the recommendation is that the Finance Committee approve the 2019 utility operating budget and submit it to Council for the October 22nd meeting for receive and file.
Any questions on the utility?
A couple of questions. Mr. McGovern, so the under expenditures, the water treatment, that's as a result of our relationship with the plant. Is that largely what that expenditure increase?
So yeah, it's a combination of the capital payment as well as the operating costs, which adds about $7 million a year to the operating budget, which has been reduced primarily as a result of a reduction in capital from operating. Yeah. So we reduced that, and as you recall, that money had been kind of flowing to a reserve to set aside funding for the big payment that needs to be made as part of the substantial completion payment. And that work had resulted in also significant savings that we had reported on as well by reducing the amount that had to be borrowed. So, yeah, that answers your question.
Yeah, you got the second one as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, so Brent suggested a motion. This change anything from this budget change anything from the last time you presented, Brent?
No, it's
okay. So we had a chance to take a look at it,
And I'll move that we accept it.
very kind of.
Finance accept the operating budget.
So receive and file and take it to council for receive and file on next week. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Thank you so much. presentations for the 19 general operating budget. Can you just want to kick this off for me for just very briefly?
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've done a couple of minor tweaks here, and then we'll let commissioners have a go at them, please.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah, this is a series of presentations by senior staff with respect to what was presented in the operating budget at our last session. So our last session was really just introducing this 2019 operating budget to the Finance Committee. Didn't really get into very much detail in terms of what is in that budget or what services are contained in that budget, what new enhancements or what projects are planned for 2019. So hopefully you have that opportunity to hear some of those items this evening. There has been a few minor changes from the draft that was presented at the last meeting, and I'll just go through them. There's only a few. Subsequent to the meeting, there was a request for an IT website design for $120,000. There was actually an error in the growth and community development revenue line for $117,000. That reduced our revenue, so we had to address that. We also didn't have there was funding for the Acadian Games for $19,000 that wasn't in that budget, oversight. There was a request for some temporary resources to help with the asset management program, and most notably the GIS support side of that program. So that was short-term for a few months for a temporary position. And we adjusted based on the Regional Service Commission's budget that was approved by a council a few weeks ago. That was only a $3,000 adjustment. So overall, the adjustments for those items totaled $281,000. And where we, I guess, took from the budget in order to support those initiatives on this draft was there was a landfill closure liability line that we had gone through last budget with respect to a future liability on that site. We reduced that amount by $200,000, and we took the additional $81,000 as out of the pay-as-you-go budget. So those were the adjustments, and we can perhaps talk a little bit more about that after you've listened to all the presentations and we receive your final feedback. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll conclude with just a reminder of the importance of the 2019 budget and recognition of some of the challenges that we have within this budget and looking forward to over the next couple of years.
Thank you, sir. So growth and development off first.
We'll get started. Pleased to be here this evening to present the 2019 budget for growth and community development services. I'm also joined by our senior team, Amy Poponoff and Phil Lett at the back of the room, in case there are any service-specific questions at the end. Maybe to set the context, growth and community development is the lead department for growth in the city, and works closely with to deliver council's priorities on growth together with the growth committee. Over the past year in particular, the department has seen a significant transition really from a traditional regulatory role into more of a role of being a facilitator of growth and driving the growth agenda on behalf of the city. And I would note there have been a number of changes in our budget and in our scope, including a new mandate to support population growth, coordination of economic development with the 3 economic agencies. We've seen enhanced service delivery to support growth outcomes, and also taken responsibility for delivering the city's arts and culture service. So certainly it's been an ambitious year, and I'm pleased to report on some of our plans. This slide just provides for the committee a snapshot of the growth and community development service in relation to the overall city budget. So we account for $11.4 million, and that represents about 7% of the overall city budget. So obviously a small proportion of the overall corporate budget and the smallest of the public-facing service areas. just looking at a deeper dive in terms of our departmental budget. It reflects the city's investment in core growth-related services, so the core services of the growth and community planning team, as well as the one-stop development shop, and the external support that the city provides to the economic agencies and economic agencies. So the core services would represent $5.2 million, about 45% of the departmental budget, and an allocation of 37 FTEs overall. And the external support represents 54% of the departmental budget, about $6.2 million. And just add that KPIs are established as part of the corporate dashboard, well established for the city's core services. We are also working with the city's economic partners and the growth committee to carry KPIs forward for the economic agencies as well. This next slide just shows the programs and resources that are allocated within the core city service portion of the budget. So the growth and community planning team is responsible for delivering the city's growth-related strategies and includes services including community planning, economic coordination with the agencies, population growth, and arts and culture. The 2019 resource allocation for this area is $2.3 million, and that's inclusive of grants and growth-related funding, and represents 13.5 full-time equivalents. The one-stop development shop is our customer-facing side of the shop and ensures quality customer service in terms of permitting inspections, infrastructure development, heritage conservation, and property-related bylaw compliance. The 2019 resource allocation for the one-stop development shop is $2.8 million, and it includes 23.5 FTEs. And I just add, while we're organized in two separate streams, we're very much an integrated service that is working together to support the growth outcomes on behalf of the city. So looking at the external support, the budget includes $6.2 million in external funding contributions towards the city's agencies and key economic and cultural assets. It includes this is broken down in terms of $2.3 million in funding to support the contributions to the city's 3 economic development agencies, so Discover St. John, Develop SJ, and Enterprise St. John, and the assumptions built into the budget are status quo in terms of 2018 budget. The 2019 budget also includes funding for economic facilities and assets, so $3.8 million, and that includes contributions to the city's economic facilities, including Market Square, the Trade and Convention Center, Harbor Station, Imperial Theater, and St. John Arts Center.
Sorry, Jacqueline, Market Square, Harbor Station, TCC, who were in those?
Harbor Station, Imperial Theater, St. John Arts Center, TCC, and Market Square.
Thank you.
So looking first at the expense budget, this shows the recommended expenses for 2019 as compared to 2018. So the 2019 chart is represented in blue. So overall, we're recommending expense budget that is a status quo budget, a small increase of 1.63%, which reflects, and this is broken down in terms of 3 expense areas: salaries and benefits, goods and services, and the contribution to the city's ABCs. This reflects the changes, reflect contracted wage increases, as well as the increase to support the city's contribution to the Acadian Games, and an increase in the city's regional facilities contribution. Otherwise, the expenses are in line with the 2018 budget. So looking at revenues as compared to 2018 and broken out by development revenues, external funding, which includes the contribution or the recovery for the Dangerous Buildings Program, and Market Square parking are the three main areas. Revenues are overall a status quo, so we're projecting a very small increase in the development revenues, which reflects anticipated demand in development projects for 2019, but we're also seeing offsetting reductions in Market Square parking and our external funding. So 2018 has been a very ambitious year dedicated to delivering on the growth agenda on behalf of the City's Growth Committee and Council. We're celebrating a number of successes that I'd like to highlight, take the time to highlight for Finance Committee. There's been continued momentum on the city's growth agenda with the roadmap near full implementation and significant progress made on establishing the city's focus on population growth. Our team supported Council's endorsement of the population growth framework earlier this year, and we're active in terms of actioning that strategy with about 30% of items complete or in progress. We're also pleased to deliver a renewed focus on urban development. Substantial effort has been driving the substantial completion of the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan, which is scheduled to be adopted by Council in 2019. We also supported continued momentum on the city's urban development incentives program, which has been quite successful and yielded positive results, leveraging 12 development projects, which reflect 73 new units and more than $7 million in construction value for the city, as well as more than 50 smaller beautification projects. In 2018, also with support from the city's growth reserve, we were able to deliver enhanced service and programs to support growth and outcomes. This includes the implementation of a pilot project for community standards, which targets cleaning up of unsightly properties and tackling urban blight in the city. We also accelerated the Dangerous Buildings Program to an ambitious target of resolving 80 cases, which we are on target to achieve. We launched, supporting those initiatives, we launched a property matching program aimed at really targeting reinvestment in vacant lands and buildings. This funding also supported boosting the city's Heritage Grants program, which supported over $400,000 in additional private sector investment. And pleased to say that this all happened on top of regular operational responsibilities, which includes supporting a one-stop, a customer-facing one-stop development shop, which year-to-date has processed more than $70 million in construction projects and is on track in terms of exceeding metrics for our turnaround times. So looking forward to 2019, we anticipate focus in two key areas, specifically to maintain the significant momentum on implementation of Council's growth-related strategies. Key priorities will include advancing the city's population growth strategy, along with a new emphasis on supporting strategic communications related to growth, so implementing a strategy around that to boost the external image of the city. Also in 2019, a significant focus on both the adoption of the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan and a new heritage bylaw for the city, as well as implementation of priority initiatives. We also have included resources to support continued focus on accelerated compliance programs, and the growth reserve is also built into the budget in terms of supporting growth-related priorities. as well as urban development incentive and grant programs to support implementation of the neighborhood plan. The other key area we will be focusing on in 2019 is to continue focusing on customer service excellence and process improvement. So really building on previous CI projects and process improvement initiatives we've had to improve turnaround times and customer service in the one-stop. Our priority for 2019 will be looking at improvements related to the community planning and infrastructure areas to improve the customer experience around the development approvals process. We will also be focusing in coordination with Develop SJ to improve opportunities to work together to optimize growth and position projects for success. And I would just close by adding that the work plan is very much still taking shape. We will be working together with the Growth Committee next month to start shaping, further defining the priorities in the work plan for growth and community development, as well as the priorities for funding under the Growth Reserve. I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any questions, concerns?
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I think it's fantastic everything that's happening, and that we want growth. We've got a growth committee, we've got all kinds of teams in place to support growth. We've got ESJ, we've got Self-SJ, we've got all this other stuff. But when I look at this, it's 7% of your budget. So I say put your money where your mouth is. If you want growth, you're going to have to switch that. No offense, Mike. If you were to give the Mike's budget of $45 million for 1 year, and I'm not kidding, you know, we put Mike in charge of roads, and that's all great, but I'm not convinced that roads will get us the growth that we're looking for. But we're spending a huge chunk of your budget, 30% of your budget on it. So if you want growth, and you say you want growth, we're always yakking about growth, and that's our savior, growth, 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 but it's 7% of our budget. I don't see it happening. What they're doing with 7% of our budget is fantastic. It's moving along like an inchworm, like it can with 7%. It's moving at a 7% rate, but I'd like it to move at a 30% rate. So that's my comments. I say if you really want growth, then put your money where your mouth is and support it. Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns?
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. That's all right. I can't make the chair go from that's okay, I'm late, so it gets stable. I'll survive. Actually, just reading and looking at the budget, just because ESJ and the partners fall under your budget, and reading that ESJ is on tour meeting, council's asking for more money on a growth on a increase strategy. Have we heard from them that they're going to be asking us for an increase in their budget for next year?
Finance has received a request for an increase, and my understanding is that that's being referred to the Growth Committee for review at this time.
Okay, so it's under review, but it's currently in our budget, the status quo.
Status quo in our budget, yes.
The Growth Committee has money to give them if they want to give them extra money. I have no interest in giving them extra money. Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
I would, just a comment or two, I would echo, Donna's. I was just sort of here trying to run the numbers too, and if you boil the numbers down, to its rawest form around what we say we need most, more people, more jobs, and growing the tax base, I think, are we investing enough money? Do we have the right plans? Do folks understand their mandates? Do we have enough horsepower there? And I use the population growth piece as a, for instance, just to remind us all that from 12 to 16, we lost around 2,500 people, and with its connection to the unconditional grant from the province, that will cost the city of St. John $18 million over that period of time until the census resets in 21. So what's the cost of not having adequate plans in place, not having the right focus, not having, the right outcomes, and it's, those are a little bit, I'm not saying any of this is black and white because it's not, but, anyway, so, I would share and echo the concerns. I mean, to Councillor Sullivan's, comments, say, we're still in sort of early review. Enterprise St. John has revamped its plans and is out now trying to say, look, here's what we think we should do. Here's our new plan, and those discussions are sort of ongoing. Is the way that I would say it. But there's been, as you've been told, no decision to give, or no council decision to not give. I understand your perspective on it, but I would echo the concerns that the stakes are so high for us around our tax base and jobs and people that if we don't get it functioning, in particular around the tax base piece, we won't have any money left over to pay the rest of these bills. So our customer base has been declining for decades, and our costs continue to go up at a rate that are far from sustainable.
Right. Excellent. The first presentation, where I think, and Kevin's here and he's listening, I'm sure he's making notes of that. We don't want to pick on Michael here, because we've got asset management to take care of as well, right? We've got roads to take care of. However, what we're hearing is that if we had some extra money, if there was some extra money, there might be a place the council would be interested in put it. Economic development. So it's something we'll make note of.
I guess to follow up shortly from this one, councillor, if we had extra money, I'd be looking for the tax rate. I wouldn't be looking to invest it. I'd be looking to invest in our pricing point. That's just, again, one man's opinion.
Very good, sir. All right. Thank you. I'm looking. Receive and file this?
Do you want to motion?
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you. Those in favor?
Right.
And those opposed? Thank you very much. All right. Next is Chief Clifford. You're next.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Your Worship, and members of the Finance Committee. I'll take you through our submission for 2019. Again, one of the challenges in fire and EMO being a big part of the budget, and then we often get those questions on comparables. One of the challenges is providing a service that would be comparable to the service that's provided to other communities, and people are very familiar with the slide. Again, just to refresh, there's 5 fire stations in Moncton, and that's in our western quadrant. And there are 4 fire stations in Perth, and we have 7 fire stations, covering the same geographical area. And fire, the response piece is a significant part. Timing is a significant part of having success and being able to measure service. So there are 6 services within the fire envelope, and council adopted these a number of years ago, I think shortly after I began my term. Fire rescue and suppression, technical rescue, hazardous materials, fire prevention, investigation, medical first response. I'll comment more specifically later on in the slides. And emergency management, which I think we've become more familiar, and then the city certainly has built better capacity as of late, and we've really put that organization to challenge. But developing and implementation, maintenance of emergency plans, and that interagency coordination, community-based emergency management, business continuity, they're all kind of themes and sayings and that people weren't familiar with prior to the beginning of this year, and I think we've all got a better sense of some of that. The emergency management, it's important to make note that the St. John EMO is a function of a whole lot of people within the organization. Jacqueline's team, Jonathan's team, Hillary's team. So we're kind of that core, that central point, but there's a lot of people within our organization. Mayor's very active within St. John EMO, the city manager. So it may sit within our envelope. It's the coordination of those resources that's significant. It's a big role for us, but we're very proud of the work that folks have done lately. So the fire and EMO services, the challenges, again, response times, trying to bring a similar level of service that other municipalities that we would aspire or would compare ourselves to. There is a diversified hazard and risk profile, and a lot of this is redundant messaging, but it just speaks to the reality of it. There is a very diverse risk and hazard profile here, and we're trying to ensure that we have adequate emergency response plans, and that's a challenge, continues to be a challenge for us. And the sustained service levels with the rising costs. No denying the costs keep going up. We've had those erosions of services over time. There continue to be a large number, in my opinion, a large number of times where we do not have any resources available in our community. and it's averaging about 42 to 50 times a year, whereby if somebody were to dial 911, they'd have to go in a queue and wait for that response. So that's where we are today. Opportunities, diversity of emergency response skills supports economic development. You know, again, some of the thought on this point was obviously Energy East, but we are an industrial community, and who knows what the future brings with respect to growth to that industrial community. And it's at least we are built to support that in some way. And so when people look at, you know, whether they're going to, you know, advance something within the industrial community that's new, and those investors look and see if we could support that, we might be able to support it. Response revenue, that continues to be a target of ours, and as you'll see when we review the revenue budget, we've got to reset. A lot of our past revenue was kind of one-off revenue streams and kind of random. We've done a lot of work at building foundation, so we still advocate that response revenue and training revenue are growth opportunities. Although for 2019 we're not ambitious on what we would achieve there, it's still part of the reset. We've got a partnership with academia, private sector, industry. We've got a lot of conversations happening with industry. We've had one prior, lots of conversation prior to last Monday. We've had a few conversations this week. We think in the fullness of time, we may find some help and find some better relationships that may reduce some of the pressure that we feel economically on our finances. Academia, we're going to be advancing additional relationship with NBCC to council in the near future around being the holders of the different course curriculum for the province of New Brunswick and being able to advance that to perhaps emergency services network across the Eastern Seaboard. So we've done a lot of work on that, and some of it is based on a relationship with NBCC and the province of New Brunswick being what you call the holder of certificate seals. Councillor Reardon's nephew just went through a program where the young man went to Nova Scotia Fire School. There's an opportunity, and we keep looking at those opportunities. There's an opportunity for us to advance some of those technologies so our kids won't have to travel, and perhaps there'll be a revenue stream there. So any discussion on a regional response model, we've been advocating forever that this fire service should be a regional fire service. And I know some of the other regional service leaders believe the same way. So if the folks that are providing the service think that would be better, then what we need is the political will to do that. And there would be some, I believe, some economic efficiencies, but more important for public safety, there would be some capability and some efficiencies with respect to and effectiveness with respect to better protecting our citizens. And I think Mr. Quinn had recently penned a message in an op-ed around the benefits of a regional fire service, and he was bang on a number of his points. And so I think we continue to be very supportive of that discussion, and I think the service itself is supportive of that discussion. We need to have the political will at a higher level to be supportive of that discussion. I think that could be something, and I think we'd have a big role there, and again, that could help us effectiveness and financially. We have tremendous inventory of skills, and we ought to be proud of the commitment that each of our commissioners and our council has put to that notion of an EMO. What is it? How does it work? And having to utilize that and put it in play. I think we've experienced 2 or 3 activations this year where we've got room to grow, but we don't need to be embarrassed about anything we've done this year. And I think that, you know, if we hadn't been committed to that, we would have had a whole lot of sores to cover up. And I'm proud of council's commitment. I'm proud of the way that the senior leadership team has advocated and put people in those leadership roles, and we've borne those investments. We've seen that, and so I think that continues to be an opportunity for us. I think we can actually be a center of excellence on that delivery as well. I think I've kind of touched on a lot of this, but we're, you know, on my desk, like many of the commissioners, the council's priorities are right there. They're on the wall, not unlike what's here. So I think having a good fire and EMO service supports the notion of growth. I have friends of mine on Mecklenburg Street who live 2 doors down from a major blaze. And I remember getting a call from the young lady, not a young lady, same age as me. Well, I guess she was young. But anyway,
That's
so
right.
I remember getting a call from her, and she said, "You know, Kevin," she goes, "you guys were battling that blaze in Mecklenburg Street." I went to bed that night. It was 2 doors down, and I still felt safe. So I think that the notion of feeling safe in this community is important. This community is very diverse, and I think that people still feel safe. So, and I think people are willing to invest. And I think, you know, from the standpoint of our service, and you know, it's very important to us what our citizens feel. And I think the Ipso Reid surveys have been, you know, a good testament to how people feel about the fire and EMO service. We're proud of what we've done with the continuous improvement. One of the things that we've just signed a deal back in July with Firemark on cost recovery. And you know, we'll see, and we've been very busy as of late. We had a pretty good house fire earlier this afternoon. I'm not supposed to say pretty good, but we had a house fire this afternoon. So and we've had a lot of activity. That Firemark is going to find a way for us to generate revenue and recover some of those costs. The event of last Monday is in that envelope of Firemark. We've in our operating budget that we're proposing to you today, and thanks to the help of finance for helping us kind of sort through this, is actually those larger fleet vehicles. We've got a plan of purchasing them through operating, and Firemark will help fund that. Will help kind of fill those gaps. But we've got money in today's budget to help us support purchasing one of our capital assets of $600,000, which we typically have had to borrow for. Last week, Council, you just approved the purchase of SCBA, worth well over $700,000 on our operating budget. And so we've moved on our 10-year budget you know, we've got a capital budget that's being worked on now, but our 10-year capital budget of $120 million, the fire ask on that, fire EMO ask on that is $3-point-some million, which is really a relatively small share of a large capital budget over 10 years. So we worked hard to lessen our burden on the capital budget, recognizing that the operating budget, we are a significant part of the operating budget. But when you look at both budgets combined, I think we've tried to show good discipline. Again, I talked about the revenue being a reset. I still believe that we need to be given the opportunity to explore what the revenue opportunity is. But we definitely are not going to meet target for 2018. We've reset the 2019 budget, and we want to provide council a cautionary note that we need to have a deal at a Point Lepreau that serves us. Right now, we get $70,200 from Point Lepreau to provide response to Point Lepreau, 2 engines and a command staff in the event that something happens. I don't think we're getting value for money, and that's up to council to process. But we're telling them we don't believe we're getting value for money, and we've got that budget in our revenue, but we need to be bold enough to say that's not enough, and if you can't come to the table with a better offer, we don't need to go there. Because I got to tell you, throwing firefighters, our employees, down to a hazard site that we don't have intimate knowledge about feels kind of blind. It doesn't feel right. So we need to have a better relationship. We need to understand how we would prepare for that better. And otherwise, $70,200 might not be the right price point for us to be willing to send our employees down there in the middle of some type of emergency. We continue to look at having sustainable. Our hazmat agreement with the province is solid, $90,200. Firemark, I talked about that. An enhanced agreement with NBCC. Emergency exercises, I believe, will be a center of excellence. And then certified course delivery through the province. I think all of those things are foundation pieces to our revenue plan. And the other lines just show you where our revenue has been. Our revenue in the past has been random and not something that we could rely on a year-to-year basis. We need to develop a better model for revenue. Our costs are basically rising, I think, at 3.3% over last year, around in that ballpark. So the wages and benefits, obviously we have contract item, and one of the reasons the wages have show a substantial growth there is because of the arbitrated increases. The other thing we had to do was we're pending on what we call a duty to accommodate. And that duty to accommodate position has been budgeted for in our wage package. But there's another end to that, but we'll wait till it falls. If we end up with that duty to accommodate, it might relieve some of the prior accruals that we've had to make. And I put the EMO piece in there. You can see the EMO piece is is up over last year by about $25,000. When you see our budget year end for 2018, you'll see there's a substantial deficit, and that's because of the cost overrun of the flood event, of which we should be getting a lot of that money back. So fire rescue suppression includes the training, the management, administration, and a new duty to accommodate position. That's 149.35 FTEs, $23.3 million. Medical first response. The MFR skill set is something we have to have anyway. We have to have it for our own folks. We're advancing fentanyl delivery as of some point this month, so we're going to be active in being able to provide a response to the fentanyl crisis. We haven't seen a whole lot of that yet in St. John, but we've advanced that. We've raised our level of MFR, yet trying to reduce our calls. Hazardous materials, again, at the province gives us $90,000, or we got a contract which they give us $90,000 a year. We estimate that the cost on the hazardous material service is $80,000. That's a quarter of an FTE. A technical rescue service. You're very familiar with some of the rope rescue and off the minister's face this summer. We actually work with St. John Water quite a lot in providing support to some of the maintenance work, and I'm sure Commissioner McGovern could speak to that. In that if it wasn't for us responding and putting those teams together, St. John Water would have to contract somebody. And one of our most noted applications was on a Christmas Eve, that there was an emergency application of a SCADA tower inspection, and trying to get a contractor to provide support to that probably would have been nearly impossible, and it's just a matter of St. John Water calling us. This fall, we're actually going to do some rope training, a fall arrest training program through the transportation environment and through Mike's team and through Peter Morgan. So we're going to provide some of that training package, which typically human resources would have to contract out. So that's within our technical rescue, fire prevention. The province has identified between 6,000 and 8,000. We're going to try to succinctly identify those properties. We are working hard. We have a new manager who I believe is one of the best people managers that you could find, and he's working in that division. And we're working hard to develop a better relationship with growth and community development. Not that there was any other issue, but we want to capitalize on the strength of both groups and try to find solutions to our citizens who are saying, well, the fire folks are telling us one thing and the growth and community folks are telling us other things, and we're going to sort that out, but we've got the right people in place and we've had good discussions. We do want to move fire prevention. We'll talk about it, the actual physical location. We'll talk about it when I talk about the work plan. Fire investigation, and we don't go to all the fire, we don't investigate all fires. We've decided that there's a criteria that allows us to best use those resources, because when they're investigating fires, they're not inspecting buildings. And so there's sometimes, the outcomes of a fire investigation sometimes aren't as rewarding as they should be. We could spend X number of hours, tens and dozens and hundreds of hours, and we may never get a prosecution, or we may never find. So we got to get outcomes. So we've changed the criteria. Emergency management. What that is that there's a number of players that are involved on it on an active basis. So it's 2.15 of an FTE. My role is allocated 10% to EMO. We have a staff member that is in administration. That staff member does a whole lot of the administrative work. Her role is allocated 0.5%. DC Carr's role is allocated 100%. And so that's how we do that. At the end of the day, we've got 158 FTEs. The total budget for fire EMO is 24.8. Is that 8 there? I think so. I don't have my glasses on. 24.8, and that's 15.55 in the municipal budget for fire and EMO. And it's just a call volume. I got that at any time. People want to see calls. I know, Your Worship, you would ask about calls. We're struggling with trying to allocate them to addresses and locations, but we'll get you something here shortly. And the work plan is, a lot of it's related to our care initiative, but it has a number of components. We want to move the fire prevention division, the actual physical location, which is at the upstairs of number 1 station. Certainly not a customer-facing location. We want to move it to the unoccupied area that's at our number 4 fire station, which is the former police location. It's a fire station, but the area on the downstairs is now vacant. So we want to put a customer's facing a delivery on that service right across from a school, which is a good touch point for us. And we've packaged that in our whole in our whole care program. We want to take the room where fire prevention is now and actually widen and extend our EMO facility till we have breakout area. We want to create a simulation theater. So all of that is tied to this work plan for 2019. We're working hard at understanding emergency response plans that need to be developed for our community. We want to create, right now we've got a request from a number of industrial industries for, like, I think we have 6 or 7 emergency response plans happening, emergency response exercises happening in October. We need to create a better schedule and a richer schedule for our community. We're still talking about advancing the training facility itself. There's lots of conversations, so we're looking at are there additional components to the facility that will help you sustain the skills that your first responders need to respond to the hazards in our community. Case in point, we send a lot of firefighters to Texas to do LNG training, and in one of the practical scenarios is they put some LNG in an in-ground tank, and you watch how LNG behaves when you apply water or foam. We believe that instead of spending that money going to Texas, that we should have that prop at our training facility. We could reach a whole lot more of our firefighters for the same amount of money. We're leaning on industry to help support that. There's some complexity on moving the LNG to an in-ground tank, but we've got to sort that out. But that's one of those things where we think our prop field could be richer for our community. I fundamentally believe we should have an oil tank where our firefighters would have an opportunity to practice fighting oil tank fires and things of that nature. So we're still working on that, and then we're still working on an enhanced industrial response model and having those conversations as part of the care. Any questions?
Any questions for the chief? Councilor?
I don't have a lot of questions, but I guess I'm thinking about, like, we always say we're an industrial city, and I'm happy to wear that label, but as the leadership for the city, I wonder if it's time for us to say, is it fair to the citizens to be downloading those costs? So should we be doing with the industry that's here the same thing you do for the pro? We say this is a fire service with the port, and you're going to have to buy it annually, whether you use it or you don't use it. And we should be doing that because I would suspect that the port is probably, I don't know what you know about AIM, but I would imagine the refinery is probably not much different than the pro. Maybe you do know it intimately. I don't know, but you're sending your staff in to places. And then I guess at this point in time, we could say, well, we can charge that back to them. But I'd like to see them paying upfront for services just like any other service that anybody has to buy. And the same with now the pro. I would like to would be a comprehensive service that they could get and what it would cost them. And then, because I think that's only fair because in an industrial city, you have extenuating circumstances and a lot of increased demands on your fire service. So I just don't think it's fair to download those costs onto the citizens. So, but that would take some change of the way you see things.
There's a real shift in mindset, and we've been involved in those conversations. To the very point, we don't think it's fair for our citizens to shoulder that burden. But the taxpayers, those industrial taxpayers, might be saying that we believe we're already paying for that in our taxes. So that's either end of that spectrum, that conversation, right? So we need
to make that clear, I guess, of what they're paying for. They're getting roads for that money. That's it.
Yeah, and I have shared with a lot of folks that council is adamant that the citizens shouldn't shoulder the full burden of what the response would be. And I do like your point that it's well enough to pay for response, like we're going to get some money back from the fire mark agreement. It's well enough to pay for response, but if you never go, you would never get any money. Yet at the same time, you need to prepare. You need to be able to have the capability to respond, and you need to be able to respond with confidence, with the skills, and you need to respond safely. So if you never go, those pieces still have to be there, and somebody is shouldering those burdens. So we are having those conversations, and as I've shared with council in closed session last week, they're tough conversations.
I mean, I'm paying property taxes as well, and I'm getting a fire service for if my toaster or my flue catches fire or something like that. I don't have a refinery in my backyard, So I think they're getting fire services based on the same fire services I'm getting and that I would expect. But if that's not for a whole refinery going up, I think that's crazy to say that they pay taxes, for them to say they pay taxes. Yeah, if their toaster catches on fire, call us. But anything else, you got to pay for it.
I know there's a few people in this room having those conversations,
Good.
and we'll continue to have those conversations. I was almost going to say cross our fingers, but we need a bit more than luck.
No.
We need to find a shift in mindset.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just wondering. If you talked to the chief in Moncton or anything. Do they have are they overextended too, or have you heard anything about?
Well, again, back to that slide that shows Moncton, Fredericton, and St. John. Moncton has 5 stations, and they have no challenges on response times. They can meet all the standard response times based on that they're a small geographical area. So they're not challenged on response times. And their hazard profile is they do not have the hazard profile we have. So that fire service really is an urban fire service that's based on residential and in business hazards. So they don't have the same hazards. I've often said that if we had 5 stations in that small geographical area, our world would be a whole lot easier. But they don't have the hazard profile. They don't. It's strange, but Moncton does not have the older housing stock that we have, and they do not have. Very seldom would they. It's awful to say, but large fires are something we see more often than Moncton. And whether it's 2 or 3 buildings connected that are 3 stories high, and I've been inside buildings that you go into a 10-foot a room that's 10 feet tall, but it's divided in half so that there's 2 rooms there of 5 feet tall. So we've got a very complex risk profile that Moncton does not have, and they wouldn't dispute at all what I say. So we have conversations, but they even on some of the industry stuff, some of the natural gas stuff, they don't have that same concern.
I was just wondering what so like the timing, because we're so big, and the complexity of our buildings, I guess.
Standard fire requires at least 4 apparatus. Moncton can get those 4 apparatus there in 12 minutes, 10 minutes. It takes us, on average, for the 4 apparatus to get there about 16.
All right. And one more thing. Sure. Have we had a lot of overtime this year?
We do not have, we used to have a constant manning budget so that we keep all our staffing at 34 people a day. If we have people out on absence, vacation, we do not have a constant manning budget. So we've had no overtime on constant manning. The only time that we have overtime is when we have an actual event. Like at the refinery, we would have called, I think we had eight firefighters in. We probably had 3 or 4 senior managers in, so that's overtime. So the overtime we call is when we are in the middle of an event and we don't have enough people.
So there's a possibility that 2019 could be, the wages and benefits could be more than 22 million? Because between 2017 and 2018, that's like $2 million.
Yeah, I think the main difference, and I didn't have a chance to explore with Hillary.
2018 and 2019 is only 600,000.
I think the main difference might be what was on there, because in 2018 we had an arbitrated settlement, and I think in 2017 it might not have been populated backwards.
Yeah, during the process, those increases would have been reflected down in the contingency line.
Right.
It wouldn't have been in 17's approved budget, so the cost would have been there. Those would have been on a different line. So
right.
You're seeing it all built in the 12 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's why the discrepancy between 19 and 18 is closer.
Contract thing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Chief, I totally support cost recovery with Point LaPro or anybody else that we're working with outside of our jurisdiction, not just for the cost recovery, but any kind of loaded cost with overhead and everything, the real cost that goes in to providing their service. It just follows on the theme of we've got to look after us.
Yeah. And
yes, love to be neighborly, but I'm not interested in donating St. John taxpayer money to other communities. Following on that, just, again, being neighborly this summer and doing the right thing, we sent some very trained people out of our jurisdiction to help rescue some folks from Minister's Face. I hope we are looking to that community to recover our real cost involved with that, which in my mind is not only the time going down there, but their training. You know, part of that training cost, you get that whole thing. Again, like to be neighborly, but I'm not donating St. John taxpayer money to another municipality.
And we have, but we've been pushed back that we might have sent it to the wrong person. So now we gotta, so it's, and I've had that honest conversation that our taxpayers pay $1.79.
Yes.
Your taxpayers pay 42 cents.
Yes.
And it's not fair for our folks to be paying for that response. And they think we should be neighborly. They think it should be done out of the goodwill of our heart.
Oh no, neighborly is.
But they need to reach deeper.
There.
The communities need to reach deeper if they're asking for this support.
Well, leave their visa.
They don't like it when we tell them that.
Tell them to leave their credit card on file, and you know, if we've got to go, we'll be there. But I'm not donating St. John taxpayer dollars to other communities. I'm happy to.
They firmly believe it's sacrilegious for us to be asking for the money after the fact.
Well, we had a conversation a couple of finance committee meetings ago. I remember very clearly. We talked about, you know, but we have a shared response. If they need help, we'll send our people out, and if we need help, but our people are more highly trained, and their people might not be able to come in and help us because they don't necessarily have the same level of training, depending on what incident we're dealing with. So, you know, to be frank, happy to help them, but I expect us to get paid, and I know you're on that track. Following up on the very good program that you helped bring forward of, what's it, Firemark? And recovery, and you mentioned, I know the butane leak you looked after, and I know conversations I think are being had with regard to the refinery, and we've had this new one last Friday with Enbridge, who, you know, broke a hole in their own pipe, and not only the poor businesses uptown, who I think should be looked after because it was not their fault, but we had a lot of people up there for a long period of time. Is it becoming part of our protocol now to look for recovery in those sorts of incidents?
Yeah. We didn't sign the agreement till July, mid-July of this year. First, Councillor, if you don't mind, former city manager Jeff Trail was the driving force behind that. I mean, we've always wanted to get there, but he found it. Evelyn Hatfield of our CI program, she's the one that actually made the linkage. I just don't want to get all that credit. I don't mind doing the work and trying to figure out how to put it together. So, but there's 13 different types of events that we would have a right to claim on. And now we have a spreadsheet of what all that is. So we're in the process now of how we're going to capture these things. When we had a fire today, we had 3 events on Friday that I think are billable. And so we're in a process of creating the right spreadsheet that allows us to track those things and provide that documentation to Firemark. All of that is in the queue now. We haven't refined our process yet. We're going to refine it, and we're going to have it. You know, it'll be working. And again, I'm excited because it'll help pay for fire trucks, so we don't have to borrow money for it.
And I appreciate that you mentioned the team that's involved, because you know, I know it's, again, a reiteration ago in 2011, 12, we were talking about car accidents and why does everybody
trying to figure it out.
Car accident but us. You know, and really, I pay residential property tax, so I expect to get some service. But you know, if I'm in a car accident, I have car insurance. Perhaps along the tax theme, you know, all that machinery that's not being taxed, that machinery is not buying your service. Maybe there needs to be a premium so that the machinery is buying your service, and you can go save the buildings and get the Visa card on file. I mean, we've got those conversations that we have to keep having. But I think the team, the CI team, and yourself are on the right track, Chief. And I think you're hearing support for it from here for sure. So keep going. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayor?
Thanks, Chief, for your presentation today. Thank you for acknowledging the service level challenges with costs. You know, from my perspective, I think it's important that our senior managers almost, you know, acknowledge, or I'm almost thinking about this afternoon, almost I'd like to see a SWOT from all of our commissioners and chiefs to say, you know, here's our strengths and our weaknesses and our opportunities and our threats. You got challenges and opportunities there. So thank you for that. I think that, you know, a couple of comments on the same theme, but before I go there, I mean, I think building on your acknowledgement that this is challenging, you can't have those discussions around service levels in isolation of the cost challenges that we have. So that's why I appreciate it, and my math might be off. When you $24,049,000, and you divide it into 150 FTE, 157,000 per FTE on average. So that's a pretty hefty number that we're carrying. On the theme of I was on the same theme that council were tonight. On these, let's take it one at a time, industrial responses, Chief, do we have an opportunity to pass a bylaw as a city to charge a levy? Have we ever looked at that to that degree? So take it one step further than we should and actually pass a bylaw?
And I don't know, well, I don't know, maybe Mr. Nugent might be better positioned. I know Mr. Fogan has had some discussions, and there might be something within the Municipalities Act. I don't know how much we might want to let discussion unravel first.
Yeah,
I don't know. So I think there might be some opportunity. Yeah.
So just a comment, perhaps.
I think I suggested to council last week in close that if we don't get any traction on CARE, ultimately at the end of the day, it'll be up to council to decide whether they want to pass a bylaw.
Right. Okay, so it's plausible with the right background and research that perhaps if we don't have an emergency response, plan that's satisfactory, say to you, council could explore the opportunity to not respond.
And I have shared that with industry.
Okay, thank you. And then so there's a levy piece there, and if you're not satisfied, so we use the example of Point Lepreau. Like, so would it be an example to say, okay, you don't want our service, this is what it costs, we're not responding, and you put your own plan in place.
And I'm more comfortable with that because they're not in our community. I think council decide we're not responding to industry that's in the heart of St. John. I think that's a real discussion.
Okay, thank you. Noted, yeah. Are we legislated, just in terms of call volume, Chief, a sort of similar question I'll ask probably Chief Connell as well. We've got call volumes, broken down by category. Are we legislated to respond to all those calls?
We're not legislated to have a fire service.
Okay.
So by virtue of not being legislated to have a fire service, I don't suspect that we are legislated to go to the calls. We have the authority to go to any fire or any potential fire at anywhere within our municipality that we believe we ought to go to, if indeed we have a fire service.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. All right. Look, I'm just going to follow. John, do you want to go? Sorry. I'm just going to follow. It's been said, but I'll say it again. Thank you for the work you're doing. Okay. But we need to recoup some of this cost, and you said it best. We've got cost out there. Just because we respond last week to this doesn't mean we don't have to have staff on ready and waiting and trained to go 7/24. All right. We need to have partnerships on this, and it's long overdue. And I want to know what we do to bring this forward. We need partnerships from local munis, okay? And whether lowest cost is that would be a good thing, but to have the entire fighting forces from all the municipalities working together, I think it's got to be the way to go. It just sounds like that's what we should be doing. We got to have partnerships from industry, okay? Whether it's Point Lepreau, Chief, you'd have my full support. If you don't think the contract's worth for 70 grand, tell them it's going to be higher or go elsewhere. We've got to have from our other folks, industrial folks out here, and we've got to have it from other municipalities or other forms of government. The feds down here at the port, okay, they don't pay their fair share either. So we need it. How do we bring it to a head? That's my comment, and I want to find out before I'm gone out of here in a year and a half. Let's bring this to a head, because the mayor used a word, and I'll do this again, okay? And Chief Connell, I know you haven't presented to us, but this is the same things we've got to look into for your force as well. We need partnership, okay? It was a long time ago. The port had their own police force. I know. I was stockpiling. I had to hide the grass then. But know, I don't know what they ever did to you folks to offset the cost, but no, we do it for them. You know? So, got to get there, and got to get there soon. We've got 2019 budget we can get through. We've got looming 2020 budget. We're not going to make it through at this rate. Not doing what we're doing now. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Receive and file.
Receive and file. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed. Thank you, Karen. You file your. Thank you.
Until we do that, we will be able to bring strength. I'm with you. Good evening.
Sure. So, Mr. Chairman, just before we start, and I'll have Marvin present some slides, but I think it's important to remember that we're with the commission, so the St. John Board of Police Commissioners have final say on our budget and make a presentation, which would happen at council. So we'll just sort of give you a brief overview of where we see this, but you'll get the full show on November the 5th.
Thank you, Chief. We understand that. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. When we look ahead to 2019 for the police budget, what you're going to see is that our ask for next year is less than 1% in total increase over 2018. And the theme for next year, certainly in discussions with Chief Conlon, is 2019 is going to be sort of a right-sizing year for the St. John Police Force. We're looking at organizationally making some changes that will take us into the future. So by doing that, what we've done in our budget deliberation is in that less than 1%, 0.96%, that includes a 2.5% increase for police officers, 2.25% increase for 486 members. So we were able to achieve that. And the next slide, I'll show you how we achieve that. That's through attrition. And even in 2009, by the end of this year, we're going to be down 9 police FTEs by the end of this year. So we're looking ahead on how we can right-size the organization and looking at maybe adding civilians and other things as we go forward. So as you look at this particular slide, you'll see that almost 86% of our operating budget is wages and benefits. That's has always been the trend. We've actually climbed a little bit because our goods and services budget has gone down over the years. So obviously the share does go back to wages and benefits. Goods and services is 14.2% at just around 3.7 million. Our revenues projected for next year is going to be about $456,000. And when we say net subsidy from the city, we're just saying after we achieve our revenue targets, our 2019 subsidy from the city is $25,479,121. We've included this slide, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. We just want to give the committee a snapshot of where we have gone from 2008 with respect to our staffing levels. What you're going to see is from 2006, our total establishment including civilians was 201, and we're projected for 177. So we're down 24 positions, which is about 12% reduction. That being said, we know that we're declining, so we're getting through the chief and senior management. We're looking at how we can right-size the organization to our service levels. Just a snapshot of the revenue sources. Obviously, we were just talking before one of the other presentations. It wasn't that long ago, our secondment revenue was about $700,000. We had lots of partnerships with different agencies, RCMP, Corrections Canada, and we'll talk about that later as far as how we're going to look at probably getting back into that business and generating revenue for our organization. So we're just looking at a slight reduction over the last year as far as our revenue projection. So future revenue opportunities. One of the things that we're looking at is we were a participant in the international peacekeeping missions, and that allows us to get full cost recovery if we have a member that goes on mission. Aside from the cost recovery, it's a real good opportunity for officers to get outside of our city and go and work as a police officer. And I know my experience, we've had probably about 10 in that period of time. They come back rejuvenated. They realize that the grass is not always greener elsewhere, and we are pretty lucky where we live. So we've always supported that program, and certainly since Chief Conlon came back, We're pursuing that to get back into the peacekeeping. The other key thing that we're looking at, and this is ongoing, is establishing more community partnerships. And obviously what we're looking for is third-party secondment opportunities where we'll be paid to do secondments. And it's not just so much, I guess, renting our officers out, is getting those synergies that we can get through other policing partners by letting them pay us to have someone there, but usually our what we really need to do there, we've done this in the past, but it's maintaining those partnerships, is that the ground support staff, an officer doesn't have to go to court. It's incumbent that we notify them, because if they show up to such the courthouse and they weren't advised that hearing was over, they still get paid. So we got to really strengthen that relationship with our partners across the street at the court building, and we're going to do that in 2019. Continuous improvement. Well, I think we like to take pride in that we're always looking at improving our business through continuous improvement. But one of the things that we want to look at is through continuous improvement options is our relationship we have with the city. You know, is there opportunities on our facility to get our costs down? We continuously do that now with the fleet people or the facility people. We want to continue that. Excuse me, continue that through fleet and IT. We think there's an opportunity in fleet that we can get our costs down. Certainly working with Ian Fogan's group and looking at ways to get our maintenance costs down, especially IT and computer lease programs. Again, we're going to look at all those again collectively with the city staff, and we believe there's savings to be found in those areas if we work as a team and look at opportunities as well. So when we look to 2019, well, it's no surprise the first one up there happened today is the training costs that we're going to incur when we look at just the launch of the cannabis legislation as of today. We currently have drug recognition experts, or DRE officers as we call them, on the front line. But just with the launch of this cannabis legislation, we're going to need more, and we're going to have them further trained than what they are, because it's really, and the chief certainly will talk about this, it really is a whole new world for us dealing with this from a frontline perspective. So there are challenges with respect to unbudgeted training costs. The budget we presented to you tonight has no allowance to do this training. Again, we don't know what that number is going to look like, so we didn't want to come in here and just throw a number and say this is what we think training is going to be for next year, but that's a huge risk and challenge for us. Another thing that we think that could happen, again, it's all new, is the traffic enforcement unit may have to be augmented. We have no idea, is there going to be more motor vehicle accidents as a result of this cannabis legislation, more people being impaired, I guess. So again, that's a challenge for us, and tonight we certainly can't tell you what that's going to look like in 2019, but we want to highlight this for the Finance Committee. And I will leave it at that for any questions that the committee may have for myself or Chief Con.
Any questions? Councilor Sloan?
No questions, but a couple of comments, I guess. First of all, strictly from a finance perspective, for the committee's benefit, because I also sit on the commission, so impressed. I know the commission's been driving Marvin overtime. I don't think you get overtime, but the numbers you've been producing for us are fantastic. And the chief, with the retirements of senior staff, you know, not only is he working on partnerships and bringing extra revenue in, and the focus on the bottom line and making sure that he's driving a professional, accountable force. But I don't know where he finds the time in the week to do it, because he's doing it without a few senior managers that we haven't rehired yet. So really just, I want to take the opportunity because the members of the committee don't get to see the detail that I do and the work that they're doing over there. That ultimately is feeding into the information we're seeing tonight, but they're doing a tremendous job. And the caveat that always comes with a police budget that I'll steal from the chief is one bad crime and it could all go bad. But right now, because of the work and focus that the leadership over there is doing, they're able to work with the commission on presenting a budget right now that's less than 1%, given that wages are increasing over 2%. So kudos to them. I just enjoy the work over there. They're doing a great job.
Councillor? Good. Mr. Mayor?
So just on cannabis, I guess still chasing the province around for for a sharing deal. I think a number of my mayor colleagues around the province are sort of chasing a revenue sharing number. I'd be happy with just costs covered. So I would ask if we could, so Marvin, or Chief, if we do see that spike, and if there can be a special code generated for reporting and training and all of these things. Certainly we've discussed that, Chief, with you, and I know there's a certain level of uncertainty, but not unlike with Chief Clifford, if we could code that appropriately so that we can have good data. If we get some revenue sharing, which apparently one of the premiers has made a comment that he would do that, we need to cement that and see where we are. And the ask has been that be revisited again, over a period of time to see how we're doing that. So I guess if we could do that, and I guess just to like a broken record, I think we sort of presented again that presentation tonight of some challenges and some opportunities, and I thank you for trying to wrestle it to the ground.
That's right.
Thank you. I guess from my perspective sitting here, it'd be great if in your, when you're looking at how can you do things differently, if you want to bring any recommendations for us, like we've talked about maybe bylaws. Right now you've got transit taking over, a component that you had that really you wouldn't need a police officer doing per se. And if you see those inefficiencies, it'd be great because if there's things that we could do by empowering bylaw officers to do some of that wouldn't really need the skills of a policeman. And I think we need to be changing the way we do business and looking at things differently. I just find that, I guess, a lot of times it's always the way we've done things. It's hard to change. People don't like change, but I think change is good for us, and I think it would empower your officers to do better work. If we could relieve you of some of that. So I would ask for your comments on that.
First of all, just have to apologize. My day started at 4:30 this morning, so it's been a long day, and I'm sort of on the back end of anything I have left of me.
Okay.
There was a number of things that we had to work on. The province was basically 12th hour that we had to implement some things for changes for today. For the presentation to council, we
excellent.
Right. So I've spoken to the commission. I guess I spoke to this committee previously. We have to get away from non-core services back to our core services. That's the only way we're going to be sustainable. We have to look at that, and part of what we're looking at in revenue generation to generate revenue for 2019 is to get back to where we used to be. It's probably about $1 million that we can bring into the organization. So, Mr. Chairman, you talked about partnerships. In fact, we have a number of partnerships that we're working on presently. We haven't signed on a dotted line, but we're moving towards regionalization of services, and we're looking at value for cost. It was mentioned earlier in one of the other presentations, just not to go through services for other folks. It's got to be cost efficient for this municipality. We need to do, as Marvin's mentioned, about right-sizing the organization, and we have to have a strategy around that, and also cost us to do some cost-benefit analysis to where we need to go. We believe just internally around fleet and facility that there's some opportunities for savings, but I do have to hit on the part on cannabis legislation. Just not sure where that's going to do. the best, use this guess from in the policing world in Canada, they think it could be up to a 2% increase in police budgets. There's equipment, it's very, very expensive. That comes with the cannabis legislation, or oral fluid to do that testing. That machine's $10,000. At this time, very few, if any, police forces are moving with that because we believe the technology will evolve very quickly and go from a 10-pound box to something that you can hold in your hand and do it roadside. So we have to be efficient and effective in how we deliver that service. But there are other costs that are going to be around that. Of course, the courts, case law will come in that, and that could have changes in how we do our business, training requirements, equipment needs. We have no idea what those costs are. I see some of the organizations in Western Canada are looking at, in fact, contracting out to services to do, when we do blood demands, to have folks come right into the police station, because one of the requirements now is no longer requiring a doctor when we do blood. So there's going to be costs, and I'm not sure how we recover those costs in the back end. And I think on the political side of conversations with the province, that some of that money needs to come back. But I don't think it would be proper, as Margaret mentioned here previously, to come in and say to this committee or to this council that, you know, we see this spike. We just don't know. We will do our very best to keep our costs at the lowest. We've been involved in the impaired driving side of a lot of this. You know, you'll hear a lot of things about impaired driving, about drug recognition experts. We've been in that business for 20 years in St. John Police Force. So we have those abilities within the organization. But what we don't know is are we going to be able to meet capacity? Is there going to be a significant spike? If we look at Colorado, significant spike in fatality accidents. Colorado is not like New Brunswick, where the regulations put where you can buy cannabis compared to Colorado. It's my understanding, basically you can buy it at every street corner. So there's a difference there. So we have to see how that all works out on a go-forward basis.
Sorry, Chief, just a couple quick follow-ups. Sort of the same question I asked Chief Clifford. You a lot of calls that you respond to, you mentioned getting back to core service. Are we mandated again to respond to all calls or just core?
Well, yeah, so the province of Brunswick, it's the only service that you have within the city that you must provide a police force, and talks about adequacy. So there are a number of core services that we provide, but what we're finding in the police force is that we're providing services that are non-core services. And I like, you know, this analogy I like to speak is that we became the lowest rung on the ladder for sustainability for other groups within the city. Call 911 and the police will come.
Right.
And so we are doing a number of things that perhaps are better suited to be within other organizations, whether that's city organizations or provincial organizations or private organizations. And that's what we need to really look at.
We become a bit of a catch-all, so pull that apart,
right,
and understand, okay, perfect.
Just if we look at mental health,
sure,
that's a health
that's
issue,
yeah.
And our increase is, you know, year over year is significant. Now we have done I would say a very good business case around that we want to present. I just can't say where that's going today, but around that, so that there's monies recovered where I believe they should be coming from, and we can be involved because we do have ability to work with nurse clinicians in the city, and I think that approach will be most cost effective overall to the police force, to the city, to the community, and to the health authority. So I think we have a fairly good plan in place, and hopefully that gets accepted, and we can make some announcements on that not later this year or early in 2019.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Will we say goodbye?
Yeah, just before you do that, on the cannabis thing, council talked about this in sessions, you know, with our own staff, and I'll say the same thing, and I'm sure you're doing this, Marvin, I'm sure I don't have to say it, but I will, in open here. I'm sure you're documenting everything. From the ink out of the pen to make notes about this, okay? And then round it up. Because we'll split this once. They'll say they'll come back to us, Chief, okay, after the original split, and we'll talk. You know the first split is going to be key.
Right, so there is money allocated between the federal government and provincial government around training.
Yes.
We have submitted already on our training side. We haven't, as of today, we haven't received anything back, but we have submitted around that. There's the second part of that. Second part of it is revenue about day-to-day operations. So we're talking two things. One for training, which is basically training, not about, doesn't pay for backfilling. So when we take members off the shift to train, we still have to have members boots on the ground to answer 911 calls. That's where, you know, that costs us money to do that. But we have to train. We have to have that training because we cannot be unprepared and again, this is really about impaired driving. So we had to be in place and have a number of our members trained so that we can adequately go to court and give evidence as to what took place. And without that training, we would not be there. So in order to do that, we paid on the back end. Now, we leveraged training because we did the training in St. John. We have experts within our organization, and we brought people in to our community. So not only do we train that way, but we also bring people here to St. John, and there's economic spin-off of that. In fact, we do quite a bit of training in our headquarters now because we have a facility that's capable of holding folks for training courses. So folks come from across this province to our police headquarters, and as a result of that, they spend many dollars on restaurants and hotels while they're there. So, and it also offsets our costs against training. So that's important.
He's ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you can go, Chief.
I guess for the Finance Committee, sorry, Chief. This is pretty straightforward. This here particular budget is for a Public Safety Communication Center, or better known as PSCC. This is what we refer to as our 911 center, or what we refer to as a PSAP. If I go to the first slide, the operating budget that we're projecting for next year is $2,488,542. It's an increase of about 2.53% over last year. Again, wages and benefits, as you will see, is the bulk of that budget, 90.4%. The interesting thing I want to highlight for the Finance Committee here is this center for the budget it generates a lot of revenue. And again, we do this through partnerships with other police services and fire departments and so on. So you'll see that when we look at 2019, the PSCC Center generates about 41% of its operating costs through revenue. And I would suggest, I don't know of any other unit or department that does that well as far as covering its costs through revenue. So we're very happy about that, and we are constantly looking for ways to increase that percentage from a revenue perspective. So the net subsidy for 2019 is $1.47 million for the center. Just a snapshot of our revenue sources, you'll see that the bulk of our revenue does come from 911 calls. We have a contract with the province of New Brunswick for 911 calls. And every time most people wouldn't see it today, but when you pay your phone bill, you pay a percentage, or I guess a fee for those 911 services. So you'll see where our budget expectation for next year is an increase of about 2.2%. Our staffing model, this hasn't changed in the last probably 5 years. The way it's set up is we have two managers. We have one that oversees the entire operations, and then we have what we call our service delivery manager, who focuses on running the center 24/7. And then you'll see the majority of our employees are through the local 486 bargaining unit, and our total establishment is 28. Future revenue opportunities, obviously we're looking at regional fire dispatch. Again, we can't project what that may look like, but I would suggest to you what was really mind-boggling was a number of different fire departments out there that we don't even do service for. It's a huge number. So we're in those conversations now, and hopefully at some point in the future we'll get a better understanding of what that may look like. from a revenue perspective. It's still early for us to even guess what that number will look like for us. So risk and challenges, well, again, when I talk about risk with the regional fire dispatch, is we don't know what that volume is going to look like from even a staffing perspective. So obviously, when we see what that may play out for St. John, we'll have to look at what our staffing needs are. The other thing that's currently, I guess, in the conversation mode, or I guess people are talking about it, is there's a possible reduction through the provincial government when they talk about reducing number of PSAP answering points. This is for 911. What I mean by that is they manage the whole 911 service, and we contract our center to provide this service. Again, they're still talking about that. We don't know where that's going to go from that perspective, but currently there's 6 centers in the province. The other thing that we learned about recently is with the next generation 911 project, this is where we will be equipped to handle requests for service via not only voice but text messaging. That's a huge unknown for the PSAP. And the equipment requirements that we have seen so far, the cost is out of your mind. It's crazy what we have to probably invest in to be able to just accept a text message and be able to respond to that properly. The other challenge that we see is, unlike a phone call, text message and any type of social media, it also can send pictures. How do you deal with those pictures and other things? So it's a whole new horizon for us. So again, we see it as a risk and challenge as we go into the future. And certainly if there's any questions related to the center, by all means, I'll try to answer them for you.
Any questions? Okay, just one of everyone's off. The last time we saw you guys, you had a hiring deficiency. You weren't full, and that put overtime costs up somewhat. Is it?
No, we still have that challenge. We're recruiting.
Challenge there.
What typically happens is we just had one employee, resign and go take another job somewhere, and we're currently recruiting as we speak today. We're getting closer to our full establishment. What we're finding as well is it becomes very tough to hire people that go into that profession and really can do it well. And so that's been a challenge. The city had a challenge before we took over the center, so it's a continuous challenge for us. I didn't identify it here because that's almost, that's part of our business model now, is to recruit and try to retain people that are qualified. So that, to answer your question, yes, we still
there, not as big as it was last year.
not as big. We're getting that much closer to that optimum number. But I would suggest you in 2019, I think we'll get there.
Thanks again.
Yeah, I was in a
Sorry,
meeting
Chief.
yesterday in Fredericton, and that's across the province,
Yes.
that retention.
Across the country.
Yes, right, across the country, but certainly in this province, same issue.
Thank you, gentlemen. Did you see the conference? Seconded by Sean. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Again, thank you.
Marvin, you drive the chief home, okay?
I was hoping he's going to drive me home.
Oh, geez.
We have to walk.
Use the lights.
Take a cab.
Transportation, environment. See you later.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm pleased to give you a quick outline of our budget for 2019 and the impact on services. So I'm going to speak a little bit more later about these different buckets and categories and what is in each. But I did want to highlight a couple things. Most times you'll see parking and transit reported under TES when it comes to budget analysis or prep. In this case, Mr. McKinnon is doing his own presentation, so I have stripped that out and we'll be speaking to that. I would also highlight that of our different services, I guess they fall into typically one of two buckets. One would be service to citizens. The other would be asset management related tasks. So what I mean by that is, if we look at roadway maintenance and sidewalk maintenance, for example, that includes both summer and winter maintenance. The winter maintenance, the plowing of the snow, the salting of the roads and of the sidewalks, that's what we would consider service to citizens. I'd say solid waste management would fall into the same category. as well as neighborhood improvement and rec programming. A lot of our other services, though, are more just around proper management of our hard assets. So the summer maintenance that we undertake on the roadways and through stormwater maintenance as well, largely those are just tasks intended to try and get the maximum service life out of those assets. So, especially the asset management components of our service delivery are very expensive. We get into massive expenditures on roadways, on other things. But unless we find a way to really reduce the size of those assets or the extent of them, we'll always be challenged in terms of controlling those costs. There are some other services that we deliver that are, I'd say, a hybrid. They're partially just taking care of our existing assets, partially providing an actual service to the citizens. So of the total city budget proposed for 2019, the TES portion, excluding parking and transit, represents about $36.45 million, or 23% of the overall budget. It is significant. On the revenue front, we do also bring in just over $2.2 million in 2019. So the breakdown of that is as follows. So we have arena rentals, which we're projecting just over $850,000 in revenue for 2019. Sports fields, $152,000 and change. So they are both up from 2018, and that's largely tied to an increase in our rates that we have for ice time and field use. I should also point out that the projected revenue for arena rentals does not take into account any potential changes that arise from a new operating cost recovery model. Of course, we are working with the Regional Facilities Commission and our municipal partners on a new model, a fairer model. We are also working on our own track for a made in St. John solution in case we don't bring everybody else along in time. But it is our intent for the 2019-2020 season that we will have a different rate structure in place, and that could impact these recovery amounts considerably. We did take in-house the utility cut program a number of years ago, about 3 years ago. So this is a service that St. John Water used to contract out to a contractor. We have been undertaking that with our own resources for the past few years. We're projecting about $888,000 in revenue on that service. I should note that there are, of course, offsetting revenues, or sorry, expenses as well. So the net revenue for that service is approximately $150,000. We have about $250,000 in revenue projected from the provincial highway maintenance agreement. We've got about $78,000 in other source revenue. That includes community center programming. It includes things like the golf course contract, which we charge rent on as well. So again, the total projected revenue for our service area for 2019 is $2,223,000 and change. On the expense side of things, we've got, contrary to a lot of the other service areas, we have a significant portion of our costs in goods and services. So those goods and services would include everything from asphalt and gravel that we use in our construction to our fleet costs, fuel, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big operation that we have. In terms of the salary and benefits costs, we're looking at $16.44 million for 2019. That's an increase of about 2.4%. And we do have various collective agreements with wage increases ranging from 2.5% to 2.25%. That's impacting those numbers. We are down a couple positions between 2018 to 2019. So we are seeing an increase on the goods and services cost, and the bulk of that, in fact, all of that increase is attributable to an increase in capital from operating. So it's a good thing. We've been able to hold a tight line on the rest of our expenses in goods and services. So the next slide, or a future slide, I'll talk about a little bit that we're doing more of that recurring capital from our operating budget. Total budget, $36.45 million, which represents approximately a 2.36% increase over this year. I just want to note on this slide that our FTE numbers there do include all students and casuals that we do hire. So they are considerable. We are, like I said, we are down 2 positions from last year, or from 2018. We went back until about 2010, and overall we're down about 12 permanent positions during that time frame. But basically, the other thing I wanted to note on this slide, it plays a big role in our budgeting for snow and ice control in the winter, as well as our stormwater management, which would have a flood response component to that, is that in recent years we've been able to bulk up our reserve funds. So that's allowed us to be much more aggressive and tight on our budgeting on a year-by-year basis. So these are based on average years. If we do get a year like 2015 when it comes to snowfall amount, hopefully not. But if we do, we have a reserve fund to sort of backstop us there. So we're able to budget quite tightly on this. So transportation engineering provides professional engineering and technical staff resources for design, construction management, and asset management of municipal infrastructure. We've got about 4.6 FTEs associated with that service. Roadway maintenance would include actual asphalt repairs, as well as snow and ice control for roads in the wintertime. About $14.2 million and 81.2 FTEs. That does also include the utility cut program, which again has an associated revenue with that. Sidewalk maintenance includes repairs to the sidewalk and curb itself, as well as snow and ice control in the winter. Budget of about $1.8 million, 15.1 FTE. Pedestrian and traffic management includes line painting, sign maintenance, traffic signal maintenance, and vehicle pedestrian traffic enhancements, things like the Safer Schools program and some of the traffic calming measures that we've undertaken over the years. The budget's just shy of $2.3 million and 15.6 FTE. Stormwater maintenance includes repairs and maintenance to stormwater systems, including ditches, culverts, catch basins. We've got about $3.5 million in that budget, 14.9 FTE. Solid waste management, basically collection of residential solid waste. That does also include littering and illegal dumping, which continues to be a challenge for us. $3.7 million in change and 16.1 FTE. Parks and City landscape includes routine maintenance and event support for the city's trails, parks, and squares, as well as management of the urban forest. just shy of $2.3 million and 32 FTEs. Sport and rec facility service includes operation and maintenance of the arenas, sport fields, playgrounds, splash pads, basketball courts, all of those items. So it's just shy of $4.4 million, 26.4 FTE. Both the Parks and City Landscape and Sport and Rec Facility Service make heavy use of students and casuals to deal with that peak workload demand in the summertime. Under the Neighborhood Improvement Program, that would be supporting various community associations and events. It would also include the Community Grants Program and the Pro Kids service. So about $770,000 and 5 FTEs. And the community grant component and library funding together are carried in that service and represent about $676,000. The rec programming service includes access to recreation and sport, both through direct programming as well as partnerships. There's a heavy component of special event support there as well. And this service also includes the contracted community centers. So just shy of $1.1 million and 7.4 FTE. Brings us to the total of $36.45 million and 218.6 FTE. I mentioned an increase in the amount of capital funded from operating. Council will recall in previous discussions at Finance Committee and at Council that in past years, one way we were able to balance the operating budget was to reduce the amount of capital that we funded through the operating budget. Really what that does though is just add to our long-term debt, and now we're paying interest on top of that. So we really want to see a trend in the opposite direction where, particularly when it comes to recurring, predictable annual expenses like our road resurfacing program, we want to fund all of that eventually through our operating budget. So we're not going to be able to do that all in one shot, but certainly for 2019, we've got an extra $600,000 in increase in the amount of capital from operating. Just want to talk about sort of some key initiatives in 2019, and in particular the road results that we've seen so far in 2018 as well. Council will recall that there was we have a target of 77.5 for our pavement condition index. So that's a rating system, and on an annual basis, we would have engineering students that go out and sort of review representative sections of every street section in the city and assign a rating based on the amount of visual distress that's observed. Our target is 77.5, and we had reached that back in 2015 and 16. We took a slight dip down to 26 in 2017. Based on the constraints of our resurfacing budget. And the other factor was a very difficult winter. If we get into a winter with multiple cycles of freeze thaw during the course of the year, that's very, very tough on our asphalt pavements. It can impact our PCI. We expect that in 2019 we'll be able to resurface about another 50 lane kilometers of roadway. Probably in December or January, we should have the final results back from our pavement condition index, and we expect it may tick up slightly back up to 77 or thereabouts, and we expect that to remain stable for 2019. This is a program that's very cost sensitive, so we've benefited the last couple of years with some competitive tendering on our asphalt costs and resurfacing costs. So we'll be putting out the tender early in 2019, and we'll be looking for some favorable pricing there. So for the most part, this represents a status quo budget for 2019. We are looking at various initiatives and special programs in 2019, some of which I'll get into, but of course, before we do that, we'll be preparing a corporate work plan for 2019. So there may be additional initiatives that pop up on this list, but these are some things that we already have some momentum on and we anticipate moving forward on in 2019. So the third and final phase of Move SJ should be completed in 2019. We've got budgeted about $165,000 to complete that. Some of the highlights of that will be the cycling strategy, but also the comprehensive system improvement plan, which can help us sort of prioritize the various traffic enhancements and intersection improvements that we know are needed in the city. Final phase of the storm sewer model should be finalized in 2019. That's an initiative that we've been working on with St. John Water, who's been taking the lead, and we have budgeted approximately $100,000 to complete that initiative next year. We have some money tucked away to dredge the Spruce Lake landfill, and we've budgeted about $300,000 towards the final capping of House Lake landfill. So House Lake in particular represents quite a liability for us. The estimated cost to complete the capping of that landfill and complete the leachate collection system is somewhere between $8 and $9 million, depending how we phase that out. Years ago, it used to be a program with the provincial government where they would cost share on this capping, but that was stopped a number of years ago, and basically our progress on capping that decommissioned landfill has essentially stalled. We do expect the West Side Splash Pad to be starting up next summer, so we've got operating funds budgeted for that. I mentioned the efforts with Regional Facilities Commission on a new cost recovery model. We're going to continue to work on that, and it remains to be seen whether we get some regional consensus around that or if we're going to have to go our own way on that. There's a few other initiatives that we have been working on. We're reviewing usage data for our community center programs and making some adjustments where it makes sense. We actually adjusted one of our contracts accordingly based on that analysis, which is going to save us about $26,000 next year and on a go-forward basis. We're looking at some changes to our arenas during the daytime. So we don't have a whole lot of paid programming during the daytime. There are some general skate programs for the community, like Parents and Tots and senior skating and other public skates. There is some paid daytime use as well, but there are hours that are not sold out. We do have a number of ice maintenance tasks and facility maintenance tasks that do need to occur during the daytime. So there is a requirement for staffing there, but we are looking this year at some changes to our model whereby we'll close one or two arenas during those non-peak times and push the programming to the other ones. So we're anticipating savings in the order of $20,000 or $30,000 on that as well. We anticipate doing a trial in 2019 with some methyl methacrylate paint. So, of course, we paint all the roadways in the city on an annual basis, but with the kind of winters we have, with the wear and tear from traffic, that requires us to paint all of that again every single year. Methyl methacrylate is a different material type That's going to be much more expensive initially, more expensive to apply, but it's anticipated that we might be able to get 6 or 7, possibly even 8 years out of that. So we're going to do some limited trials in 2019 and see if we can't, see if it makes sense to do a wider implementation of that. Finally, we intend to vacate our Boar's Head Road facility in 2019 or before that, and that should allow us to open that site for sale or redevelopment. So a lot of our forces we're going to be squeezing into our Forest Hills complex on Westmoreland Road. So that could be a good opportunity as well in the future. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions? Councilor Reardon?
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate all that information that you brought forth. I guess what I'm always saying about roads is the same thing over and over again. Rather than chasing them from an asset management perspective, I'd like to have more metrics on them. You know, and I've said that before, and I know you guys are looking at some of that. Are they on a transit route? What's the tax base on it? Who's using it? Is it a commuter route? You know, is it an area that's scheduled for growth? All those things, you know, so that we can be strategic with our money. If we're going to spend 30% of our budget on that, well, I mean, it's a combination of those things. I think that needs to be strategic. It's a lot of money. One thing I would like to look at some point in time is garbage. We're spending nearly $4 million, $3.7 million on it right now, but we could take that out of your taxes, drop your taxes, and then charge. I think we could charge for it's costing us $4 million now. We could probably charge 12 because we would look at everyone. Because right now, if it's over 5 units in an apartment, we don't pay attention to that. We say, well, they have to have private pickup. We don't know whether they do or they don't. We don't know if they're putting it out and we're picking it up. And we're collecting garbage like it's 1950. And since that time, you know, consumerism has gone crazy. When you look at box stores and what's available, and packaging and all these other things. So there's a lot more garbage now, and there's no incentive to reduce it as long as it's sort of buried in your services. So I'd like to see us pull it out and take a real good look at it, because off Sam Davis Drive, we're going to have that big, you know, landfill that we're going to have to mitigate the issues with it. It's going to be very expensive, and I think people don't think about it because it's just free part of the collection. Anyways, I'm going to have to go because I got a ticket to the Imperial for 7:30. I'm going to wait till quarter after. But I do appreciate all the work everyone's done tonight to bring these budgets to us. Thanks.
Anyone else?
So then, Claire, you were hoping for an augmentation of the road budget?
No, John, you're interpreting that wrong.
Okay.
If there's no one else, Michael, I know roads are contentious with some of the council and certainly. But on behalf of the board, 4 people, I was going to thank you for what's been done out there. Before they call you up and want more, thank you very kindly. I think you did a lot of work this year. And the other thing is that the cost recovery on our arenas, ball fields, let's get it done. Is anyone here a tide here? Is anyone here, you know, a tide from the councillors that, you know, we just want to be fair? Give us our fair share, okay? Give us fair taxation. Support us where we're in your neighborhood, when we're in your community. That's what I hear tonight anyway. Receive and file?
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very kindly. Next. And transit.
So thank you for the opportunity to present our budgets this year. The subsidy request for 2019 for transit is $5.781 million. That's up from $5.632 last year, $149,000, or a little more than 2.5%. Conservative revenue estimates for 2019 is 4.571. Last year our budget was 4.525, about $46,000 is what we're projecting. Very conservative estimate, by the way. So that makes up our operations. Those two numbers make up our operational budget. A little bit about ridership and revenue. Largely our revenue comes from ridership, and ridership has stabilized. At the end of September, we are up about 1% year to date, and that's the first time since 2015. We measure our cash on a weekly basis, and in September month, we had our largest cash week since 2015. So ridership is kind of, it's not only stabilized, but it's trending up. We're about 1% up. So we're in good shape there. We're very strong, and I see that continuing. In addition to that, with the introduction of 12 new buses, as you know, our charter work has spiked. In 2018, this is kind of an abnormal event, I guess. We took our largest single charter in the history of transit. We had $100,000 in revenue on one single charter. With the introduction of 12 new buses, our planned maintenance, the ability to free up buses for this type of work, which is profitable, we've had great success in doing that. That's been largely successful for us. One of the threats that we have on the landscape for revenue for transit is the school board. Our school board revenue for bus passes is in the order of $350,000 to $400,000 a year. We found out in the middle of this summer that that's going to decline. The thought is that high school students are going to be a focus for the traditional school bus routes and school buses. Come September, there was a drop in revenue, a drop in pass purchases, but that quickly, by the end of September, the school board came back to the table and purchased what they normally purchase. So uncertain about the logistics of that. It seems to be very confusing. Usually what happens with the school board is we get a number, we lock it in, and we budget for that in the next year. That hasn't happened this time, and it seems to be all over the map. So it's a bit of a threat. We built that into our revenue numbers for 2019. We don't know exactly what's going to take place there. So I'll just flag that as an item. From an expense perspective, included in the $149,000 uplift is all of the committed collective agreement rate increases. Just as an FYI, our collective agreement for transit is coming to an end at the end of 2019, so we'll be going into bargaining shortly, before then. So that won't have any impact on 19, but certainly it will 20. One other item of note is our paratransit line item in our expense budget, which is the handy bus service. They're in the process right now of negotiating their collective agreement. We haven't participated in that. We have spoken with them. We've given them some guidelines. We subsidize paratransit, as you know. There may be an uplift coming to us as a result of their collective agreement. So we're watching that carefully, I guess I'll say, and that's built into our expense budget too, at least what we predict it might be. Diesel costs, diesel fuel costs, we buy about 1 million liters of fuel every year. Diesel has gone up substantially in the last year, it continues to do so. We put some mitigated cost things in place. We have a fuel hedge. It certainly doesn't hedge for the entire amount of our purchase on an annual basis, but it does mitigate the impact of diesel rising. And it's been significant for 18, and I expect that's going to carry through in 19 with the rise of oil. One other thing that's built into our expense budget is service hours. We took opportunity to delve into Move SJ, the transportation plan, IBI, and in August month we actually had a ridership survey that we launched. We put a person on every bus at every time of day, and we got ridership feedback. And we took that feedback and we married it up to Move SJ, and we decided that in 19 we would implement changes according to all of that. The idea and the goal here is to make sure that we maximize the amount of revenue coming back on any trip on every route. And what that looks like is about 1,800 service hours over the course of a year. We will prune the less producing routes. Typically they're on the outlying areas of the city. We'll bring them back into the primary densification area, and we'll add frequency. Our area of focus is UNB, the hospital area, McAllister to and from, and that'll be a higher frequency. In certain times of the year when school is in at UNB, we have people standing on the bus, they're full. So that's an area of focus for us. From an on-street parking perspective, our revenue projection for 2019 is 1.837 million. In 18, it was 1.790, up $47,000. Very conservative estimate. Our expenses are just about the same. 616 for 19, 591 for 2018, about $25,000. With our collective agreements, even with the uplift in salaries, we're pretty much holding the same. There's a bunch of reasons for that I'll share with you. In September, we added an additional 11 pay-by-plate machines into the street, 5 on King Street, 4 on King Square, 2 in Germain Street. What we're seeing, at least initially, I don't know if the trend's going to continue or not, but the ease of payment seems to encourage people to park. We have credit cards, we have credit tap now. Pay-by-plate is being well received. You know, there's always some negativity, but it's by and large being well received. Revenue seems to be increasing as a result of that. We implemented these at St. Joe's. We put the unique thing about the St. Joe's implementation is there's a machine in the lobby, and instead of going back out to your car to buy more time, if you need it, you can buy it in the lobby. You don't have to pay or display anything. We are currently offering receipts with these machines. That's a paper cost. What you'll see happen is that'll be a choice. You'll get yes or no, do you want a receipt? We'll never actually get away completely from paper, but it's a lot less expensive than what we were doing. Hotspot revenue continues to increase. It's 6% over 2017. Meter revenue, as you know, the net profit on meter revenue is better than ticket revenue. It's something that we encourage. We'd rather have meter revenue than ticket revenue. It costs less to get that type of revenue. 2019, we're going to continue to roll out new pay-by-plate machines. We have 10 more going. And again, we will introduce in early Q1 2019, we're going to introduce debit and debit tap. So the payment mechanism is getting easier, and it seems well received. With our pay-by-plate machines, again, we're going to the receipts will kind of diminish over time. We'll use less and less paper, you know, things are going very well. We're very strong. The net profit in on-street parking is stellar, and it continues to rise. So at this point, I would welcome any questions.
Any questions for Amy?
The transit service, sorry, Mr. Chair, the transit service budget line item is a bit different than what you presented. Is that, Mr. Fudge, does that include capital on the carrying costs on buses, or?
Yeah, what Mr. McKinnon just presented was the operating subsidy.
Right.
So there's also a fiscal subsidy that provides St. John Transit. So the overall, I guess, subsidy to St. John Transit, when you combine both, is $7.9 million.
So that's debt finance.
That's right.
Yeah, so the operating subsidy plus debt financing. Thank you. Well, I love hearing. I think it's kind of change we need to make. You know, love the what we call it route optimization. Really studying that and taking a look at what a model looks like that's more frequent within, you know, a more dense boundary, and you know, ultimately leading to folks hopefully making choices to live, you know, within that area if they're void of a car. You know, so I like the sounds of that. Good. Personally.
I just, is there a number, have you even thought of a number that would switch you from diesel to, you know, a renewable source for the buses, like electric or something?
So we've looked at that. There's a logical entry. We believe there's a logical entry point for electric vehicles. In order of magnitude, diesel buses that we buy today are around $500,000. An electric vehicle is about $1 million. So the business case to do so comes from fuel savings, carbon tax if it exists, that type of thing. I don't think we're there yet, but it's not in the too distant future. I don't know where the logical entry point is, but we're thinking about that. We had thought about natural gas powered buses, but I can't make that business case work, and there's a variability with natural gas that there's not a comfort level there. I think the next technology for buses is electric. I just don't know when.
And maybe if there's a test to build on that, if there's a test opportunity through some kind of grant or a pilot project, be kind of neat to.
Yeah.
Receive the file, please. Thank you, Gary. Second it. John, thank you very much. All those in favor? And opposed? Thank you, Sachi. Finance. You want to take that, sir?
I'll take that.
Very good.
Finance Administration Services budget. Just to quickly go through the services included in our budget. We've got financial management service. This also includes our materials management, our risk management, our fleet management, our facilities management. Under facilities management, we have a carpenter shop. It also includes the operation of the city market as well as our real estate department. So the Finance Administration budget 2019, it represents, if you remove the assessment charge to the province, which is approximately $1.3 million, it represents about 4.8% of the budget. So the overall budget is $8.9 million, 6% of the budget, but removing that assessment fee, it comes in under 5%. With respect to the overall budget, the Finance Administration budget is actually down 5.89% compared to 2018. And you can see wages and benefits are about 1.94% higher just from normal inflationary factors. The big change is with respect to our goods and services. Goods and services, it's also 38.58% decrease in the cost of goods and services. So overall, our budget is 5.89%. With respect to revenue, which represents about $3.7 million, in 2019, our interest revenue, we've increased it to reflect really what we've been achieving. We've been reporting surpluses every year on interest, and because interest rates are rising, our balances have been higher with respect to some of the reserves that we have in place. So we've made that adjustment. We feel comfortable with that adjustment this year. That's realistically what we can expect moving forward. On rentals and fees, the big drop is a 26% decline. The big reason for that is obviously the Department of Fisheries lease that we no longer have for the Coast Guard building. That was generating somewhere in the vicinity of $300,000+ a year. That's no longer in place. For internal services, there's a slight drop there of 5%. That's primarily due to we used to bill for financial services to St. John Development Corp. And with Develop SJ, there's a new model where we've seconded a resource to the city, so that particular resource would do the books for Develop SJ, so that billing relationship's not there as it was before. Our interfund charges, this would be charges to St. John Water for various services that the city provides, legal, financial support, HR support, so that's consistent year over year. Then our miscellaneous revenue also is consistent year over year. On the expense side, for financial management, there's 23 FTEs, and there's a number of services included in financial management. That would include our billing collections department, our accounts payable department, our treasury area, our cashier's office, the folks that look after our tangible capital assets. We have a pension administration resource, with the payroll department, and we have folks that look after financial reporting, analysis, and forecasting. For materials management, this department's responsible for the city's procurement and overseeing the city's inventory and stock rooms. There's 12 FTEs for a budget of $1.1 million. Mr. Fogan's area in risk management, this would be responsible for the protection of the city's assets, 2 FTEs, along with liability insurance that we cover. Fleet management, there's 32 FTEs in fleet management. This would include the Ross Avenue garage, and we have the east and west location. We have a north depot body shop, and we have the Adelaide garage for small engine repair. Resources around the area. Facilities management, there's 20 FTEs for a budget of $2.7 million. This would include Mr. Emin's area for asset management, facilities management group. This would also be the budget where you'll see the city market operations and the carpenter shop. And then finally, our real estate department. This is our professional staff to look after our real estate holdings. So in terms of key initiatives for 2019, we try to put items on the slide that are working on the business, not just our day-to-day work. So this committee is very well aware of some of the projects that are very important for not only our department, but for the city of St. John. We'll see the completion of a long-term financial plan in 2019, and that would bring to this group a review of the 10-year operating capital plan. It also bring to the Finance Committee a debt management plan, and we'll also be embarking on a public engagement process for early Q1 with respect to our budget. We're also key players in the participation of the working committee of the province, and it is looking at sustainable solutions for our structural deficit. And this is a lot of work. It's a lot of business case, a lot of analysis, so we're actively involved in that process. We'll also be bringing the final 2 financial policies in 2019 to the Finance Committee. We're looking at multi-year budget submission for the capital budget potentially next year. That's something that could help drive the business and allow us to make investment decisions over the long term. We'll be working very closely with Mr. McGovern on the water rate studies, and in particular the universal metering review that we'll be bringing in 2019, maybe perhaps late this year, but 2019 early, if not. We continue to look at, we put disaster mitigation funding as an example, but we're continuing to look at federal and provincial funding opportunities to help augment and fund our capital assets and capital investments. So as we start looking at our capital investment plans over 10 years, and you start looking at how you can sequence those investments, and then you look at the opportunities that are out there to fund, you really look at, I guess, our infrastructure and our opportunities in a completely different lens, and I look forward to the Finance Committee being able to take a review of that to see what I'm referring to. But we do continue to seek new opportunities for funding. And we continue to look at continuous improvement. Obviously, that one project we have embedded in the budget isn't going to happen year over year. But we do continue to look at projects. We're looking at our accounts payable process. We want to look at moving to more digitization rather than relying on paper, moving to payment cards to take opportunities in discounts and other incentives. We continue to look at our City Hall move and opportunities and efficiencies that we can incorporate into that process, and also digitizing our payroll process and perhaps even electronic T4s, moving to electronic T4s. That's the Finance Department, and with respect to the administrative services, a number of significant projects that Mr. Fogan will be overseeing in 2019. We continue with our asset management phase 2. We have the City Market Tower renovation project that will come to a conclusion in 2019. This is a lot of work and a big undertaking, along with the City Hall renovation project. So big projects for a facilities management group to overlook.
Does he know?
He's just finding out right now.
I wondered why he was turning pale over there.
For fleet, we're continuing to look at, you heard Chief Connell talk about opportunities earlier tonight with fleet. We continue to look at the efficiencies of that group and continue to look for opportunities to reduce costs and to recover costs. So there's a lot of initiatives with respect to that service. Our real estate group will be looking at tax valuation process and looking at opportunities with respect to property tax. Our city market manager will be looking into the development of a strategic plan for the city market, and obviously working very closely with the growth and community development folks to make sure that's integrated with the vision we have on with respect to the neighborhood plan and other elements of our growth plan. Risk management, with the new City Hall comes risk management considerations such as security, so reviewing the security that we have in place and whether we can obviously improve security and do it at a lower cost, leveraging technology. We look at business continuity planning from a risk management perspective, so that covers a gamut of scenarios with respect to business continuity. And we also look at an opportunity in just across our service area with administrative resources. We have a lot of siloed services with separate administration resources. Is there an opportunity to pool administrative resources? You not only provide scale and backup and support, but you can also perhaps do this in a more efficient manner. So we're looking at those opportunities as well. I'm not going to go through these KPIs. I'm just having these here for demonstration purposes only, that we have shifted our business to looking at measures, performance, reviewing that, not only on a financial macro scale. So this group, this finance committee is well aware we have a dashboard. We look at our financial health, reviewing that on a normal basis with this committee, but we're also looking at our operational KPIs. So in particular, the last one on the slide is just an example where we're looking at our EFT ratio to the number of actual manual checks we process, and the less manual checks and the more electronic payments we can make, the risk is reduced, and also the cost efficiencies are there. So we continue to look at our operational KPIs. And we're also continuing to do that. Mr. Fogan meets with his managers on a regular basis with respect to key statistics and KPIs on administrative services, looking at wrench hours for fleet, looking at the cost of risk and risk management, looking at the number of visitors and what kind of trends we're seeing in the city market revenue, looking at our infrastructure deficit with the street I'm in. So we're shifting to performance management and monitoring our performance with respect to those measures. So with that, in a nutshell, is Finance Administration Services. Please take any questions that the committee may have.
Questions for Mr. French? Comment?
Just more of a comment, I guess. But do you guys do electronic pay stubs now?
We do. We do. Yes, we do. Yeah. We do electronic pay stubs. We're looking at moving towards the electronic T4 process. We do have electronic pay stubs.
So that might be helpful because where I work, they try to do electronic pay stubs and it completely failed, so they went straight back to paper. So people will play you tooth and nail. So
there's a weekly email that city employees get with their link and to the electronic pay stub where they can look at all the deductions and their weekly pay and overtime.
I just know that can be difficult sometimes. So thanks.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Just, well, I guess a general comment as well, Mr. Chair, is just the, I think it's very positive, the number of KPIs and the oversight that's been sort of presented here tonight. They're pretty ambitious projects again for 2019. So I think it just shows the sort of the hands-on, and as the commissioner said, working in the business, but also more importantly working on the business. So I think there's some really positive aspects here, and I guess just kudos to all the presenters tonight, but to all of our staff, all of our management team who are carrying KPIs just like this in their business units, trying to drive change.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Was it quick? Have we analyzed? Is it cheaper for us to do fleet all the mechanic stuff rather than going outside and just hiring somebody when we need it? Have we looked at that?
We're looking at that. One of the I'm going to get into just to close the meeting and the session of potential barriers we have to cost reductions. But that's exactly one of the barriers we have. So we do have a collective agreement that has a minimum number of 278. So we conduct this business analysis, which we should do anyway. We should look at that and keep abreast of what the markets, what the cost would be in the market to carry fleet services compared to how we can do it in-house. Let's say we did do that and we found there was a 40% cost reduction to achieve that. Right now we're restricted because we wouldn't be able to shed those costs from a human resource perspective. So it does limit our opportunities, but we should be and we will be continuing to looking at those business cases under the lens as if we had no restrictions at all, because that really gives us insight as with respect to what issues we should be taking on with respect to the collective agreement. So just an example, back in 2012, I believe we did a business case for council on whether we should insource or outsource solid waste collection. And we did that even though we had the 278 restriction. We did it as if we didn't. So we could really understand what the better model was. And so that's what we got to continue doing. But yeah, right now we do have limitations and barriers to cost reduction.
Yeah, well, I just encourage more, because I know, I think their solid waste is part and part. But, is it better to have the numbers in there and out of fleet, or just on the whole of the operation, understanding the restrictions that we have?
Absolutely.
That we're maximizing it across the operations, because I think my sense is if we just looked at fleet maintenance versus private sector, we're probably paying more, but how much that can we mitigate? So
I agree 100%. We should be looking at whether we should be in the body shop business, the welding business, whether we should be replacing windshield wipers and standard oil filter changes versus what you can do that in the market. So we should be looking at all those things. 100% agree.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone, just receive and file for me, please.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
And carried. Thank you. Thank you, Cameron.
Sorry.
You're looking for the clicker, so you're next up.
I am.
All right.
I'm the last slide deck here, so.
Figure
I will,
that and clean up.
yes, I will endeavor to be as efficient as possible, but we'll cover some important
Skip a
information.
few slides.
Yeah. Quickly, in terms of corporate services, it includes the city manager's office, which also includes communications, human resources, information technology, and GIS, and strategy, performance management, continuous improvement. We're also going to talk about the common clerk's office and the city solicitor's office. The city manager's office is comprised of the city manager, deputy city manager, and administrative support. The city manager's office provides overall management strategic direction to the corporation of the city of St. John. Our primary drivers are clearly the policies and priorities of Common Council. And as I mentioned previously, the city manager's office also provides direct oversight to the city's communications strategy, performance management, continuous improvement, information technology, GIS, and human resources departments. 4 core strategic service functions that work through our office, which support our operational or public-facing service areas. We also provide support to fire and police on the IT technology side of things through a service arrangement. Just quickly, our recommended budget is captured on this slide for each of the different service areas and subcomponents. Service areas represent 38 full-time people. I should reference that I know most of the presentations today capture some ongoing resource challenges, but I know in particular with this group, over the last decade, the number of full-time resources have declined from 44 to 38. So we're probably doing more with a headcount that's been reduced by about 16% over the last decade, which is a common theme I think you've heard from all of the service areas. Our 2019 recommended budget is just over $6 million. It's an increase of $204,000, or about 3.4%. I should reference, and I think the Commissioner of Finance referenced this at the beginning of his presentation, more than half of that increase is reflective of a special project, and that's involving the complete renewal of our website in 2019. And that it's not just simply about content. We're going to reinvent our website in terms of architecture, enabling technology, content, and in particular, it's going to have a really strong focus on the public safety piece, the communications piece, the population growth lens and focusing on attracting new residents and also supporting existing residents. And in particular, as we move to a new, or as we hope to move, I guess, as part of the plan here, to a new physical city hall. We also are planning to move to a new virtual city hall concurrent with the physical renovations and the transition. And again, we want to build off the one-stop concept and enhance our service delivery and our connectivity with residents and citizens. So that's a big part of that. And what I'll do is, John, do you want me to turn the clicker over to you?
So, Mr. Chair, the clerk's office, we administer 3 budgets. There's our budget, the Mayor and Council, and Regional Services Commission. And as most of you know, some of the services provided by the clerk's office, Secretariat for Council and Committees. Just to name a few, so some of the ones we cover for agendas and minutes would be growth, finance, pension, regional facilities, nominating committee, and St. John Energy. We manage the Right to Information program, corporate signing officer, corporate records management, procedural advice to mayor and council, and city bylaws. And so we have 5 FTEs, myself, deputy clerk, 2 admin support, and an admin officer. Budget is asking 581, 685. Or sorry, that would be for 2019. 2018 was 569, 921. For Common Council, the budget is 481, 252, and in 2018 it would have been 473, 203. Mayor's office 194, 911, and the previous year was 176. I would like to point out in all 3 of those budgets, the 2019 ask is actually less than the 2011 spend. So in the case of the clerk's office, 2011 we would have been 8 FTEs at $969,000. Common Council back in 2011 would have been 485, and Mayor's office would have been 201,000. So all 3 of those budgets are now at a lesser amount than in 2011. And the change, so it would be a 3.4% increase from 2018 to 2019. And it's primarily due to salaries with some of the, we have some unionized positions and there was an increase in management pay and slight increase in goods and services as well. And that's it in a nutshell. If there are any questions.
Any questions from either Ian or John? Questions, concerns? Pretty easy then, guys. Huh? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh,
the wrong way.
Oh, yeah, you're still, yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. The 1/2, 1% budget that our department consumed, I know it's keeping everybody at the edge of their seat.
Been waiting all night for your presentation.
But nonetheless, it's an interesting opportunity, I find, to review perhaps some of the nature of the work that we do. And we do provide advice to Common Council, and provide advice to the administration, the officers, provide legal representation before the courts and administrative bodies or any decision-making tribunals on behalf of the city, on behalf of the administration,
many of the issues that we deal with are ones that perhaps aren't apparent on their face. For example, this evening a question was asked of the fire chief whether or not we must respond to all calls. And the chief answered correctly that the municipality in this province is under no obligation statutorily to provide any level of fire service at all. However, that might lead us to jump to the conclusion that all you have to do is make a decision not to provide it anymore. Well, I can assure you that it's not nearly so simple. And similarly, when the question was asked to the chief of police about returning to core services, what are core services, and the chief was talking about what they're doing that he doesn't find fits perhaps within what someone might describe as the core services of the police force in the municipality of St. John. He did, interestingly, refer to the provision in the Police Act that says that municipality in the province of New Brunswick, while it is obliged under the terms of the Municipalities Act or the Local Governments Act to provide police services, the Police Act provides that those services must be adequate. Now, adequate is not defined in the Police Act. It's not defined anywhere in statute. So when we begin to make adjustments in that respect, there are significant challenges, and they are challenges of a legal nature that have to be assessed from the perspective of the statute on case law and a number of factors that make sometimes seemingly straightforward questions anything but straightforward in developing an appropriate answer. And that's where our job comes. We are consist of the establishment of 4 lawyers and 1 administrative position. Getting to the number here, we see that there's $55,000 increase in the recommended 2019 budget. And what's fast, I think if you look at these charts, these bar graphs, it might become a bit of a challenge to grasp where the changes are actually happening. And I'll try to do that very quickly and simply without being simplistic about it. As I said, we have an establishment of 4 lawyers. A couple of years ago, one of our lawyer positions was seconded to the Safe Drinking Water Project. So that meant we went from 4 to 3. The agreement was that the Safe Drinking Water Project would compensate us for that loss of the position, or at least a portion of the position. And we made a decision at that time, as much as a good guess as anything else, how much of that full position we were going to lose in terms of its being able to provide services in the normal sort that we provided had that position remained in the legal department. And I think we came to the number of 75%. Our experience has been over time that it's essentially 100%. But nonetheless, we're working with that arrangement that we're being subsidized, or being compensated to some extent by the Safe Drinking Water Project for the loss of that position. We use that money to retain a person on a part-time basis to provide legal service, not as an employee, but just as a retainer, like we retain anybody working for a law firm. That arrangement has lasted for a couple of years, and early this spring, decided that that person decided that was going to be the end of their contribution in that fashion. And as a result, we sought a contracted employee, and we were lucky in June to find a contracted employee who worked full-time, and the full-time wages were about $25,000 more than we were paying for the part-time retainer. And that is largely reflected in what we have here before you. That difference between the $628,000 and the $763,000 paragraph on the left-hand side is comprised of $104,000, which is what was the salary of the contract employee we hired in June, plus $18,000, which is the increase in wages of fringe benefits for all 4 people employed in the department, all 5 people employed in the department, and another $14,000, which reflected minor increases in the number of line items. So the thinking was that we would have that full-time contracted position available for 2019, or at least the majority of it. Unfortunately, that person left last week, and the budget remains the same, and we're in the process of trying to find a replacement contract employee to fill that role. So, as I say, the long and short of it is that the budget shows an increase of $55,000 proposed for 2019, and the hope was, the expectation was that that would result in one full-time position as opposed to one part-time position for a lawyer role in the department. If there are any other questions, if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to try to answer.
There's just a couple slides here I'll just finish up with really quick here. With corporate services, if you look at the entire portfolio here, we're typically not revenue generators, although we're continuing to identify shared service and cost recovery models in an effort to generate or allocate new revenue sources to help offset our corporate services expenditures. So we're targeting a 32% increase in budgeted revenue in 2019. So that is a focus for us. And just in summary, the last slide here is just the cumulative corporate services budget recommendation. We have an overall budget of $8.23 million, and that again reflects City Manager's Office, IT, HR, CI, Strategy, Performance Management, IT, GIS, City Solicitor's Office, Common Clerk's Office, Council, the Mayor's Office, and the Regional Service Commission. So salaries and benefits are up by $224,000, goods and services by $765,000, but we are looking to offset revenues with some new, offset expenditures by some new revenue sources by $27,000. So that's a final summary of where we are, and we'll stop there.
Very good, thank you. Anyone? Questions, comments? None? Receive and file then, please.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? And opposed? Carried, thank you. At the end of the presentation, Commissioner Fudge, would you wrap it up for me, please? Just take us home on this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although we, over the last couple sessions, we've put a budget before you, it appears to have been put together quite quickly, and we've gone through it. As a treasurer, as a city treasurer, this is an extremely difficult budget, a very unorthodox budget, a very difficult budget. Although we are recommending to bring it forward to Common Council, it's extremely difficult. Simply because it's a budget that the city can't afford over the long term under the current business model. So saying that, the stakes are quite high with respect to the provincial municipal steering committee, working committee, with respect to finding long-term sustainable solutions for the city. I just want to highlight, some of the considerations in this budget for this committee to take into consideration. In 2019, we're balancing this budget with $8.9 million of provincial funding. That's 13 cents on the tax rate with respect to the heavy reliance on that type of funding from the provincial government, short-term special assistance. Take into consideration, you combine that with the unconditional grant, which is $16 million. We're running an operation that's close to $26 million with revenue we don't generate on our own. That's 16% of the overall budget. So to me, that's a dangerously high reliance on revenue that we don't generate. And none of this information is new to this group. This is during a period of stagnant growth. Last year, we saw assessment-based growth of 0.39%. And just looking at last year on its own, our expenditures, our operating expenditures, rising at 2 to 3% a year. That's 6 times the amount of the growth we had last year. That's not sustainable. There's a new game at home. Every time I say the word sustainable or unsustainable, someone takes a drink when it comes to our finances. And we continue to make investments, we continue to work. We continue to work on population growth, we continue to work on our growth investments. But that's really challenging when your sticker price is way above your competitors. Now, we've talked about our highest tax rate in the province and our water rates. we don't have a lot of flexibility or options to generate more revenue. That's our primary source of revenue. We talk about population, and I guess discussing with Mr. Roulette and the growth folks. 1971, St. John, CMA, St. John had 84% of the CMA population. So we had about 89,000 people out of 106,000 people in the CMA. We're now at 53%. So 67,000 out of 126,000 in the CMA. And it's really difficult to compete when you can drive 10 minutes down the Mackay Highway and you can enjoy tax rates that are 50% less than the tax rates here at the City of St. John, with none of the risk profile that the city residents here at the City of St. John have with respect to some of the comments the fire chief made earlier tonight. So we're dealing with limited revenues, and we're making the right decisions with respect to fiscal responsibility and fiscal management. We are focusing on the right areas. We're focusing on debt reduction, but the reality still is our debt is 400% higher than Fredericton's. It's almost 100% higher than Moncton's as of 2017. So we're making progress, but we have a lot more road to go with respect to that. And we're trying to reinvest in our infrastructure, and we know we're not investing enough. We need to double the amount we invest now to keep up with our infrastructure. Also a challenge. And I was looking at we've heard from many service areas, our geographic size and how that's a challenge with respect to the service provision. And we've heard by a number of people you can fit both Moncton and Fredericton in the boundaries of the City of St. John, but of those three communities, you would think we'd have the highest tax base. We have the lowest tax base of those three communities. We fit both those communities in our boundaries, and we have the lowest tax base. It's extremely difficult, and this is tax base that's really on the backs of our residents. Our taxes are funded 61% by the residents of St. John. Very heavy reliance, and that's a demographic, by the way, that have a average household income in the city of $52,000. So their burden, much lower average household income than you'd see in the valley. The lower income folks shouldering 6% of their income on taxes, municipal taxes, as compared to about 2 or 3% in the valley. So very difficult challenges, very difficult budget to recommend, and we often hear people ask, well, just cut your cost. Just cut it. It's easy. $10–15 million. Well, we have a very simple business model when it comes to our financial statements. It's either tax-based growth or it's cost and services. And let's say we embark on the cost side. We embark on, let's cut $15 million of the service areas. I'll talk a little bit about the flexibility of our business structure, but we're talking about severe cuts to the community. And you've heard from all the commissioners, everyone's working really hard. Everyone's providing the best service they can provide, but it's just a matter of numbers. And so $15 million to the community, you're talking closure of fire stations, elimination of proactive fire prevention and crime prevention. You're cutting drastically in your public transit. You're closing arenas and ball fields and things that give quality of life to the residents of St. John. You're going to have no choice but to reduce significantly your economic development investments, which is what we direly need for growth. You're going to see major impacts in snow clearing, road maintenance, community programming, community investments and support be virtually eliminated. These are severe impacts with respect to what that kind of expenditure cut represents. And in terms of our business model, we are very inflexible, because if you think about our budget, and you have it before you tonight, 55% of our budget's wages, benefits, and special pension payments. It's $90 million of $156 million. Then we have to service our debt, and we have to fund our agency boards, commissions, all with no capital from operating. So that's almost 80% of our budget. And when we talk about wages and benefits, we've talked about it tonight, our restrictions. We have binding arbitration for public safety. In addition to binding arbitration for police, we have a no layoff clause for police members that were hired prior to 2011. Our outside unionized workforce, Councillor Sullivan asked about fleet and I guess, opportunities there. We have a minimum number of 278 in our outside workforce. Our inside unionized workforce have a no contracting out clause. When you add up all these restrictions, that's 86% of our wages and benefits that we have some sort of restriction tied to. And we're trying to transform our businesses and change our business model. It's very, very difficult. And we're unique with respect to our special pension payments because that's a $10 million payment annually that other communities don't have. $9.5 million special pension payment in this budget is another 13 cents on the tax rate. So it's significant challenges. I think it shows the stakes that in the fact that we have to work with tremendous urgency to find a sustainable solution. And I'd say we have a window, and I'm sure the city manager can echo this, I'd say we have a window to 6 to 9 months to get something done and find a solution. So with that, again, it's an awkward budget. It's not an easy budget, although it was put together easily. It's not an easy budget to recommend. But tonight our recommendation is to bring this forward to Common Council for consideration as received and filed.
So, yes, City Manager. Yeah, just a few follow-up comments just to, on the urgency and the timelines. I echo the Commissioner of Finance's concerns. As acting City Manager and as a city resident, they do keep me up at night. I just wanted to very quickly walk through sort of our efforts to address the sustainability piece from a timeline perspective. Our long-term sustainability efforts involve a very challenging process with an increasing level of urgency. Our council actually introduced the pre-election white paper this summer. I think it was well received, and it clearly articulated a number of challenges, but we also brought forward some policy solutions. In August, council received verbal and written feedback from each of the political parties. Again, I think it was substantive in nature, and I think it's a really good foundation for further political engagement. In September, we had a provincial election with the resulting uncertainty in terms of outcomes. I think we still don't know who's going to form the government. We continue to actively engage, as the Commissioner of Finance referenced, a number of senior staff continue to actively engage senior G&B officials with respect to the objectives outlined within the white paper. I would say that they're taking those issues extremely seriously. Our immediate goal is to address the deliverables and timelines in the 3-year Government of New Brunswick City Sustainability Funding Agreement. The big one here is a report back to the provincial government and city and council here with recommended actions aimed at solving, I say solving, the city's structural deficit by year end. I would suggest, and you talk about a short runway here, but I would suggest that we have a 6-month window in 2019 to implement the recommendations coming out of our work. And as part of that, there will have to be some public and stakeholder engagement, which is planned by the Finance Department as well, and has been talked about with this committee. So again, a lot has to happen very, very quickly, and there's still a lot of uncertainty, but there's a lot of very committed people working on on our sustainability issues and what some of those solutions could be. So I echo the Commissioner's support in terms of bringing this budget forward, but also recognizing the challenges we have ahead of us.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you. First of all, can I have someone move the recommendation that Kevin put forward, please? Second. Thank you, Sean. And I'll ask for any comments for the last time this evening. Comments, concerns?
Oh, just a couple of comments, I guess. I think Kevin and the city manager, the commissioner and the city manager, I think covered off everything I had. For most of the things I had, I think, tonight again, we've had another good discussion. And just like we're moving towards, Commissioner and Mr. Chairman, we're moving towards long-term financial plans. I mean, I think that, we're having a 1-year discussion, but in isolation of, I think we need to have sort of 1-year discussions, but against a 5 or a 10-year window. I think, we're well on our way to that. I made note of the, without an $8.9 million check this year, we're in receivership essentially. And I just think we cannot go too much longer. our financial challenges were never solved. All this plan gave us was a little bit of breathing room. And I think, you know, I'm incredibly supportive of your 6 month sort of, you know, that you said 6 to 9, but 6 month timeline. I think that's incredibly important. So we need to be preparing a plan B. There's too many untouchables, frankly, in my view. You know, when you list off the barriers that we have to writing ourselves here, there's too many untouchables, in my opinion, and our ability to manage our business is severely handcuffed. You mentioned it. I think, you know, not that we've lost sight of, but, you know, the folks I asked for from Kathy some information on our operating budget, and just from memory, in 2004 or 2, somewhere in that range, it was 90 million. This year it's 59 million, and our customer base has declined. So we're running with fewer customers with you know, significantly more costs. Those folks make $30,000 on average, and median family income is 54. So our fundamentals are broken. So we're outstripping folks' ability to pay. Councillor Sullivan mentioned, you know, tax rates, and I totally agree. You know, I think we have, just a couple more comments. I know we're not the private sector. You mentioned it, Commissioner. People stop me all the time on the street and they say, Mayor, just fix it. Just fix it. And I don't think they understand our barriers, and they're sure as heck not going to understand our barriers if we're afraid to talk about them. So, and I say by we, staff, not saying, you know, and council, we have to stand united, I think, and together and support staff to say, here's where we are, but most importantly, here's where we can be. And, you know, that's what I'm interested in. I think we're so full of potential. However, we won't achieve it unless we fix the fundamentals. So I think we are having the right conversations. And I think that's something, Commissioner and City Manager, you need to think about is we've been accused of, and there's some folks that don't believe us. So in other words, we've said in the past the sky is falling, and somehow we eked our way through. My view is we used the credit card. We borrowed more. We kicked balls down the field. But somehow I think we have to answer that question to what's different this time. Because there are folks that don't believe us. I mean, I've seen it in the last week, folks calling for more and more money, and, you know, I know you won't do it, and we know you're not serious. So I think we have to answer that question as well. And again, I'll end. I think it's incredibly important that through this process, council, so not just the 4 or 5 of us, but the rest of council, have this discussion as well, Commissioner. Maybe a teach-in for council here really soon, so that folks understand the severity of what we're dealing with. And if this council won't stand united for a tough plan and a tough discussion, we're going to be in trouble. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair? Yes. I guess there's 2 points in it. Really just future consideration. I mentioned this at our last meeting, but I didn't mention it at the beginning, because I think, in my opinion, one of our challenges to getting that population back up as that wonderful effect is our price point. So as we move forward and certainly control our costs in this tough budget with, you know, the $8 million short-term loan. Well, first of all, the provincial government's got to figure out who's going to make the decision. But once they make the decision on what they're going to do with property taxes and some repetitive revenue starts to reappear, I strongly urge us to look at using some of it to address our price point. The second thing I worry about, and I worry about this when we sign the agreement, and I think I mentioned it in meetings before, just about timing of the election and this working group. Now is not the time, but perhaps in the not too distant future, like really near future, like maybe the next council meeting, to get a briefing, and if it has to be in camera or wherever, on where that is right now. January is just around the corner, and I'm a teacher, so I understand due dates. Now with the due date for the report, if we're gonna hit that 6 to 9 month window to make changes, we need that report in January. So I would really appreciate, you know, an update as soon as possible on where those talks are. Thank you.
I'll just finish up as well, you know, and echo everything that's been said here from the Commissioner to my fellow councillors here. But I will say there's a fix to this, okay, and let's be clear about that. Let's understand that if we implemented what was in that white paper, we've got the fix, okay? We do, we've got the fix. So here you're exactly right. We need that report in January the 2, or whatever the first day back is. We've got to see where we are. But there is a fix to it, you know? We should get paid for our services properly, okay? The white paper, fair taxation, all right? And then there's a fix to this. And there's a fix to your price point, too. I think we could do it all. And it's coming to that. And Mr. Mayor, you're exactly right. We have cried wolf a few times, the city of St. John. But then this staff has worked hard enough to go and fix that problem, okay? And the average Joe that goes to work 9 to 5 doesn't see that you're down bodies. Doesn't see that the chief's down bodies, the 2 chiefs are down bodies. Doesn't see that staff in general is down bodies here, okay? They don't see it. They're still making this place tick. John said the budget, that particular budget was at 2011 levels, all right? So, you know, no one digs into that, and they should know that, you know, we have cried wolf, but staff has gone to the wall and fixed it for us. Or you know, we've helped as well. So, but that can't continue. What has to be done is, you know, this fair taxation report, the sharing of services properly, this getting paid for what we do. That has to be done, and it has to be done immediately. We'll get through this budget in 19. In 2020, if we take the provincial deal, which is a bad deal, it just puts us right at the edge of the cliff, and you will not get by 21st, 2021. You won't do it. Anyway.
I think the urgency, Mr. Chair, that the Commissioner has laid out for us tonight is right on the money.
Yes.
I think we need to be certainly working on and thinking about a plan B. I think I agree totally with the last comment. And the other P around 2020, I don't think we can go. And you just laid out, we got 6 to 9 months to get this fixed. And I think the other piece that, you know, I had a good debate at Tim Hortons the other day with somebody on this said, Mayor, you know, you don't have a cost problem, you have a revenue problem. And I said, no, sir, we have both. We have both, because to get to the more competitive situation that the councillor is so passionate about, as am I, you know, to lower that price point so we can be more competitive, we have to address costs as well. And I noted from, again, folks are not going to like what I'm about to say maybe, but I went to a Don Mills presentation a couple of weeks ago, some of us did, and it was noted that 42% of New Brunswickers last year got a raise. And of those 42%, the average was 1%. So we have so far outstripped what the folks paying the bills are getting and receiving that we've made ourselves over decades uncompetitive, right? So we have a cost problem and we have a revenue problem, and we need to work on both. And that's what the white paper and other issues is trying to do for us.
So with that, I'll take a vote on the final motion, please. All those in favor?
Right.
And those opposed? Thank you very much. We're adjourned.